Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back through the mists of time, far beyond cities, beyond writing, beyond even the first flickers of civilization, to a world where our ancestors faced the raw, untamed power of nature. The wind was colder, the nights were darker, and survival wasn't guaranteed. Yet somehow they made it. They not only survived, they thrived. We are talking about the prehistoric humans, the earliest members of our species who learned how to carve a life out of a hostile planet filled with predators, ice, and endless uncertainty. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy the kind of content that merges myth and mystery. And hey, let us know. From where are you watching and what time is it for you right now? It's time now to dim the lights, settle in, and let's cover what we have for tonight. Together. When we picture the world our prehistoric ancestors were born into, it's almost impossible to grasp the scale of difference between their Earth and ours. There were no borders, no cities glowing in the night, no hum of electricity or distant roads. The planet they walked upon was wild in every sense of the word, untamed, unpredictable, and profoundly alive. It was a place of extremes, of beauty and danger intertwined, where every sunrise carried both promise and peril. The first humans didn't come into a comfortable paradise. They entered a stage that had already been shaped for billions of years by fire, ice, and evolution. The continents were drifting slowly toward their modern positions, but the climate remained volatile, swinging between scorching heat and freezing cold over the millennia. Massive ice sheets sprawled across northern Europe, Asia, and North America, burying mountains under white silence. In the tropics, dense jungles pulsed with life. Snakes, giant insects, early primates, and predators whose names we no longer remember. To survive here required more than muscle or teeth. It required adaptability, and that adaptability became humanity's signature trait. When the earliest members of the genus Homo appeared in Africa roughly 2.5 million years ago, they inherited a planet already in flux. Earth was cooling. Seasonal cycles were becoming more pronounced. Grasses replaced forests across wide stretches of land, and new grazing animals evolved to roam the plains. That shift forced our ancestors to change their way of life. The trees they once depended on for fruit and safety could no longer support them entirely. They had to venture out into the open, where danger and opportunity walked hand in hand. Imagine the landscape they faced. Endless savannas rippling in the heat, dotted with acacia trees and herds of grazing antelope. The air vibrated with the calls of insects and birds. In the distance, a storm built on the horizon, dark, rolling, and full of electricity. Beneath that same sky prowled lions, leopards, hyenas, and packs of wild dogs. To survive, early humans needed to observe everything. They became expert students of movement and sound. The rustle of grass that warned of a predator, the faint crack of twigs that hinted at prey. Every detail mattered. The Earth's atmosphere was still thick with dust and pollen. Volcanic eruptions occasionally darkened the skies. Lightning sparked wildfires that swept across plains, clearing vegetation and reshaping entire ecosystems. Out of destruction, new life always emerged. And the humans living through it began to recognize patterns. How new grass grew greener after a burn. How herds followed that renewal. This observation wasn't just awareness. It was the beginning of understanding the cycles of nature. They didn't yet have science, but instinctively they were becoming scientists of survival. Food was a constant challenge. Early humans were omnivores, scavengers at first, feeding on fruits, roots, and whatever meat they could find. They competed with vultures, hyenas, and jackals for carcasses. A single bone with marrow inside could mean the difference between starvation and strength. Over generations, they developed stone tools to crack bones and carve meat more efficiently. With every small innovation, they gained a fraction more control over their environment. The world remained harsh, but now they had leverage. Water dictated everything. In the dry seasons, rivers shrank and animals gathered around the last remaining pools. Those pools became centers of both opportunity and danger. Abundant food sources, but also crowded hunting grounds for big cats and crocodiles. Learning to approach carefully, to drink and leave quickly, to read the signs of predators was vital. The humans who could anticipate danger survived to teach the next generation, but the environment wasn't uniform. The Earth of that time was a patchwork of habitats. Grasslands, forests, lakes, deserts and coastlines, all shifting with the climate. As ice ages came and went, habitats expanded and contracted like a living organism breathing in and out. Some groups of humans found themselves isolated, others forced to migrate. This constant environmental pressure forged diversity within the human lineage. Some species grew tall and lean to shed heat, others stockier to retain warmth. Evolution sculpted us through trial, error, and endurance. In regions near the equator, humidity and heat shaped daily life. Tropical rains could flood entire regions, turning trails into swamps and isolating families for weeks. Diseases spread through insects, forcing humans to learn which plants soothed fevers or warded off bites. In colder climates, glaciers crept across the land, reflecting sunlight and lowering global temperatures. Food was scarce and survival often depended on scavenging from the kills of wolves or big cats. It was brutal, but it forced the mind to sharpen and hands to learn. Earth itself was still geologically restless. Volcanoes reshaped continents. Earthquakes split valleys open. In East Africa, tectonic activity formed the Great Rift, a landscape of steep cliffs, deep lakes, and fertile soil. Here our ancestors thrived. The Rift Valley became humanity's laboratory, its unpredictable environment driving adaptation. The combination of rich food sources, challenging terrain, and frequent climate shifts acted as nature's training ground for intelligence. It's hard to overstate how dangerous life could be. There were no safe zones, no permanent shelters. Nights belonged to predators. When the sun set, the world transformed. The cries of nocturnal animals filled the air. The roars of lions, the laughter of hyenas, the eerie calls of night birds. Darkness was absolute. Early humans likely huddled together for protection, their senses heightened, waiting for dawn. Over time, this nightly fear taught them something profound, the importance of community. Alone, they were vulnerable. Together, they were powerful. And yet, within that struggle, there was balance. Nature provided as much as it threatened. Fruit trees, edible roots, fresh water, and occasional game kept them alive. Early humans were not conquerors of the world, but participants in it. One species among many, bound by the same natural rules. Every movement they made was shaped by the rhythms of the environment, the migrations of animals, the rise and fall of the sun, the cycle of the seasons. As millennia passed, the world kept changing. Some regions dried up, forcing migrations toward the coasts. Others warmed, opening new territories for exploration. This continual reshaping of the planet mirrored humanity's own evolution. Flexibility became their greatest asset. When food sources vanished, they moved. When climates shifted, they adapted. That instinct to explore, to walk toward the unknown, was born from necessity, but it would one day define our species. At the same time, the diversity of life surrounding them was astonishing. Giant mammals, known as megafauna, dominated the landscape. Mammoths, mastodons, and woolly rhinoceroses grazed in herds. Enormous ground sloths wandered the Americas. Saber-toothed cats and dire wolves stalked them from the shadows. In this world, humans were not yet dominant. They were small, clever, and persistent, navigating a food chain where they were often prey as much as predator. What truly set humans apart, however, wasn't their strength or speed. It was awareness. They noticed patterns others missed. They saw how a bird's flight could reveal the presence of predators, how a change in wind direction could carry scent, how a certain color of cloud meant rain. Over generations, this sensory awareness became intelligence, and intelligence became strategy. They were not reacting blindly to their environment anymore. They were reading it, interpreting it, and using it. The Earth's climate was unpredictable, with alternating wet and dry periods shaping every generation's fate. When rains failed, droughts could last for years, and vegetation disappeared. Groups had to migrate in search of greener lands. This constant movement brought them into contact with new species, new challenges, and eventually new opportunities. Migration wasn't just physical, it was cultural. As groups separated and reunited, they exchanged habits, techniques, and perhaps even the beginnings of communication systems. In many ways, the world they inherited was an immense classroom. Every challenge demanded innovation. Every risk offered a lesson. Early humans learned to cooperate with nature rather than fight against it, to read its signs and follow its rules. Their survival depended on harmony, on knowing when to move, when to hunt, when to rest. If we could step into that ancient world for a single day, it would overwhelm the senses. The smell of earth after rain, the constant hum of insects, the sight of endless horizons unbroken by buildings or roads. Life moved with the rhythm of nature, unmediated and raw. Every moment required focus. Every choice mattered. Even then, change was the only constant. Over time, glaciers advanced and retreated. Forests grew, died, and grew again. Entire species came and went. And through it all, humans endured. Not by resisting the world, but by flowing with it. The earth they inherited was harsh, yes, but it was also fertile ground for something remarkable, the birth of intelligence, cooperation and foresight. This world, dangerous and beautiful, shaped every aspect of who we are today. Our curiosity, our adaptability, our desire to explore, it all traces back to those early humans standing on the edge of a savanna, gazing out across the unknown, deciding to take one more step forward. Long before names, maps, or borders, there was motion. Humanity's story is not one of stillness, but of walking, step after step across grasslands, rivers, mountains, and deserts. The earliest humans were wanderers because the world itself demanded movement. Seasons changed, herds migrated, water vanished, storms rose. To survive, they had to follow the rhythm of the planet. Every footprint they left behind told a story of adaptation, curiosity, and the unending search for what lay beyond the horizon. Roughly 2.5 million years ago, in the shifting landscapes of eastern Africa, the first members of the genus Homo began their journey. They were not yet the fully modern humans we recognize today, but they carried the seeds of everything that would define us. Standing upright, balancing on two legs, they could see farther than their primate cousins. That view of distant trees, smoke, thunder clouds, and moving animals was both invitation and challenge. The world stretched out before them in all directions, vast and filled with danger and opportunity alike. Walking on 2 feet freed their hands, and that small anatomical adjustment was revolutionary. Those hands could now carry food, tools, and infants. They could gather stones and branches, shape them, and defend themselves. The spine lengthened, the pelvis narrowed, muscles shifted. Every physiological detail evolved toward endurance rather than speed. These were not sprinters built for a single burst of flight, but marathoners built for distance. Humans from the very beginning were made to move. The African continent at the dawn of humanity was not a single uniform environment, but a patchwork of habitats. In some regions, grasslands rolled endlessly beneath a hot sun. In others, forests thick with fruit and shadow offered refuge from the glare. Between them stretched dry savannas punctuated by rivers and lakes that filled and emptied with the changing climate. This variability forced our ancestors to become flexible. Where one group of animals specialized, lions in hunting, zebras in grazing, humans diversified. They ate whatever they could find: roots, seeds, carrion, fruit, and occasionally the meat of small animals they could trap or scavenge. It was a precarious existence, but variety became their advantage. That willingness to try, to explore, to adapt, laid the foundation for migration. When drought struck and vegetation failed, many species died out. Humans moved. When volcanoes darkened the sky, they waited, learned, and shifted territory. They followed rivers upstream and down, mapping the land in memory. This slow drift, across generations rather than lifetimes, was not planned or deliberate at first. It was instinctive, a response to hunger and weather. Yet over hundreds of thousands of years, it transformed the entire course of human history. Imagine an early group of Homo erectus standing on the edge of a Rift Valley plain. Behind them, dry winds sweep through the grass. Ahead, they see greener land shimmering in the distance. There is no debate, no counsel, just movement. They begin to walk, carrying with them the fire they have learned to tend, the tools they have napped from stone, the young clinging to their backs. That single decision, to walk towards something unknown, would be repeated countless times across continents and millennia. The fossil record marks their progress like faint signposts. Stone tools discovered in places far from the earliest African sites show that by nearly 2 million years ago, Homo erectus had reached the Middle East and Asia. Later, their descendants or relatives spread into Europe and beyond. These migrations were not one-time events, but waves overlapping and branching like rivers. Climate shifts opened and closed corridors. When ice retreated, new valleys emerged. When it advanced, roots vanished beneath glaciers. Each generation inherited both the world and the consequences of its parents' wanderings. The first wanderers did not travel light. They carried knowledge, how to find water, where certain edible plants grew, how to strike flint to create sparks. Much of this wisdom could not be written or spoken. It was taught through demonstration, through repetition. Children watched their elders shape tools and learned the subtle rhythm of hammer and stone. They learned which clouds meant rain and which meant dust. Every migration was a classroom without walls, and the lessons were written on the landscape itself. The challenges of long movement reshaped culture and cooperation. In groups that wandered, survival depended on unity. A lone individual rarely lived long. Hunters needed watchers to guard against predators. Gatherers needed others to carry. Fire had to be maintained continuously even while traveling. These practical demands strengthened social bonds. It is likely that during these journeys, rudimentary communication systems, gestures, vocalizations, perhaps proto-language, evolved to coordinate movement and share information. Migration and communication became intertwined, each fueling the other. The environments encountered along the way were diverse beyond imagination. As humans left Africa and ventured into Eurasia, they faced towering mountain ranges, monsoon jungles, and frigid tundra. They met animals utterly new to them, woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer, and eventually the cave lions and bears of Ice Age Europe. Each ecosystem demanded different skills. In colder regions, they learned to use animal hides for warmth. In wet tropics, they discovered plants that repelled insects or healed wounds. Knowledge became portable culture. Ideas carried farther than any material possession. What drove this unending movement? Necessity, yes, but also curiosity. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans explored even when they didn't need to. They crossed rivers without knowing what lay beyond. They followed herds simply to see where they went. There was something restless in their nature, a spark that refused to settle. This curiosity may have been the first expression of what we now call imagination, the ability to picture a place unseen and believe it might be better. The wanderers adapted not just physically, but mentally. Living in a world that changed from valley to valley required foresight. They began to plan ahead, to store food when it was plentiful, to anticipate the return of animals with the seasons. Migration taught patience and memory. To find their way back to a waterhole months later, they had to remember landmarks, the shape of a hill, the bend of a river, the position of the stars. Over generations, this spatial memory became instinctive. Even without maps, they navigated vast territories with an understanding that bordered on the mathematical travel was not without loss. Many groups vanished, leaving no trace but a few scattered bones or tools. Droughts, diseases, and predators claimed countless lives. Yet for every band that disappeared, others moved on, carrying fragments of their culture forward. This persistence, this refusal to stop moving, ensured that humanity would eventually reach every habitable region on Earth. As populations spread, they encountered new climates and pressures that accelerated evolution. In regions of intense sunlight, skin retained higher levels of melanin for protection. In colder, darker regions, it lightened to absorb more vitamin D. Diets changed with the environment. Coastal wanderers ate fish and shellfish, while inland groups relied more on game and plants. These differences, born of geography, gradually sculpted the incredible diversity of modern humanity. Every variation we see today, height, build, skin tone, traces back to these ancient journeys. Migration also spurred innovation in technology. When the environment changed, tools had to change with it. In forested areas, axes and scraping tools became vital. On open plains, long-range weapons like spears proved more effective. Fire use spread rapidly, not only for warmth and cooking, but for shaping landscapes, burning grass to flush out animals or renew growth. Stone technology diversified. The simple flakes of Africa evolved into more refined hand axes, which in turn gave way to composite tools made from bone, antler, and wood. Movement encouraged creativity because stagnation meant extinction. The wanderer's relationship with the natural world was intimate. They did not dominate it. They interpreted it. To cross a desert, they read the color of sand and the flight of birds. To find water, they watched where animals gathered or where certain plants thrived. The earth was their guidebook, and they learned to read it fluently. Every migration reinforced the lesson that survival depended on observation, not conquest. As their range expanded, so too did their encounters with other human species. In Eurasia, early Homo erectus populations eventually gave rise to Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals, while in the East, groups evolved along different lines, leading to the enigmatic Homo floresiensis and denisovans. The world became a tapestry of related yet distinct humans, each adapted to its own corner of the globe, and occasionally those paths crossed. Evidence of interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals suggests that when wanderers met, they did not always fight. Sometimes they joined, exchanged ideas, and merged bloodlines. Migration thus became not just the spreading of people, but the blending of species. To appreciate their endurance, consider distance. From Africa to the farthest reaches of Eurasia is thousands of miles, crossed without compasses or domesticated animals, without agriculture or permanent shelter. These travelers faced snowstorms, deserts, and predators that modern humans can scarcely imagine. Yet they persisted, generation after generation, because the instinct to move was stronger than fear. Movement promised opportunity, and opportunity promised life. Every successful journey expanded their mental world. Each new horizon brought unfamiliar stars, landscapes, and creatures. To make sense of it all, they developed symbolic thought, an ability to imagine, to represent, to teach through example. Some archaeologists believe the seeds of art were planted during these long wanderings. The repetitive rhythm of travel, the shared hardships, and the need to explain the unknown may have given rise to storytelling, ritual, and the first sparks of culture that went beyond mere survival. As tens of thousands of years passed, these wanderings gradually connected the continents. By roughly 60 to 70,000 years ago, fully modern humans, our direct ancestors, had begun the most significant migration in history. Crossing the narrow Bab el-Mandeb Strait from Africa into Arabia, they stepped into new worlds. Within a few thousand years, they spread eastward into India, Southeast Asia, and eventually Australia. Others moved north into Europe, adapting to cold climates and shorter days. Later waves reached Siberia, and during an ice age when sea levels were low, crossed into the Americas. By the time glaciers receded, humans had encircled the globe. The wanderers had become global citizens before the concept existed. Everywhere they went, they left behind traces of ingenuity. Stone tools shaped with precision, hearths lined with ash, and eventually painted caves that captured the animals they followed. Each artifact is a whisper from that restless past, a fragment of a much larger symphony of movement. Their story is not one of conquest, but of endurance. They did not set out to rule the world, only to live within it. Yet by following rivers and herds, by adapting to snow and sand alike, they achieved something extraordinary. They demonstrated that intelligence is mobility, that thought itself is a kind of journey. The same curiosity that led them to cross mountains would later lead their descendants to cross oceans, to chart stars, and to imagine worlds beyond the earth. Even today, traces of the first wanderers linger within us. Our fascination with travel, our drive to explore space, our restlessness in confinement, all are echoes of those ancient steps across African plains. The world they walked was vast and unforgiving, but their determination to keep moving transformed it into home. They were not merely travelers, they were the architects of humanity's future path. Every road, every migration, every act of exploration traces its lineage back to them, the first. Wanderers who refused to stand still beneath an ever-changing sky. The Ice Age was both a terror and a masterpiece of nature, a time when Earth itself seemed to breathe cold, when glaciers carved mountains into new shapes and entire continents lay beneath oceans of frozen silence. For prehistoric humans, this was not a distant myth, but the reality of every sunrise. Their world glittered with frost and danger, sculpted by storms and time, demanding from them an ingenuity that would forge the very essence of humanity. When temperatures plummeted and ice advanced from the poles, it was not a single endless winter, but a series of pulses that came and went over hundreds of thousands of years. The last and most famous of these, known to scientists as the Pleistocene glaciation, began about 2.6 million years ago and persisted until roughly 11,700 years ago. Within that span, Earth cycled between glacial and interglacial phases, each bringing radical change. Forests withdrew southward, deserts grew and seas receded. revealing bridges of land that would one day connect continents and allow humans to roam further than ever before. For those who lived through it, the Ice Age was a paradox, its beauty inseparable from its brutality. The sky held a clarity modern eyes rarely see, sharp and blue above endless plains of snow. In the distance, glaciers gleamed like walls of crystal, creaking as they moved. Herds of mammoths trudged across the tundra, dark silhouettes against the pale horizon. The air itself carried a metallic tang so cold it burned the lungs. In such conditions, every breath was an act of will. Prehistoric humans, already adapted to varied climates, now faced their most formidable teacher. The cold dictated everything: where they could live, what they could eat, how they built and how they dressed. The simplest tasks became tests of endurance. Water froze overnight, fingers numbed within minutes of exposure. Yet life did not retreat entirely. It adapted, and so did the humans who followed it. Fire became sacred. Around its light, families gathered close, sharing warmth and stories. Flames flickered against walls of caves and shelters, turning stone into living murals. Fire transformed raw meat into nourishment, hardened wooden spear tips, and kept predators at bay. To lose it was to invite death. To keep it alive was to possess power over the elements themselves. It is no exaggeration to say that the mastery of fire was the dividing line between existence and extinction. Shelter evolved in tandem with the climate. In the coldest reaches of Eurasia, humans built semi-permanent homes from mammoth bones, stacked carefully and covered with hides stitched by sinew. In forested regions, they bent saplings into domes and layered bark and moss for insulation. Caves, once temporary refuges, became seasonal homes. The art that blossomed inside their walls, the painted bison of Altamira, the running horses of Lascaux, was born from those long winters when survival confined people to darkness. Within that darkness, imagination flared brighter than the fire itself. The diet of Ice Age humans was rich in fat and protein, for only such fuel could sustain bodies against the cold. They hunted reindeer, muskox, and bison. They scavenged the remains of mammoths brought down by packs of wolves. Every part of an animal was used: meat for food, hide for clothing, sinew for thread, bones for tools, and fat for light. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be. Survival depended on efficiency, a philosophy that would echo through human culture for millennia. But the Ice Age was not one continuous sheet of white. Between the glaciers, vast regions remained open and fertile during milder periods. Steppe tundra ecosystems stretched from Western Europe to Siberia, covered with hardy grasses and scattered shrubs. These plains supported immense herds of grazing animals, whose migrations shaped the movements of human groups. Where the herds went, people followed, building seasonal camps along their paths. The rhythm of the year was measured not by calendars but by the return of prey. Communication grew more sophisticated out of necessity. Coordinated hunts required planning, timing, and trust. Hand signals, vocal calls, and perhaps early words guided movements across snow-covered terrain. A misstep could waste precious energy or scare off an entire herd. Success was communal, and so was celebration. Around shared fires they divided meat and reinforced the social bonds that made the next hunt possible. In these circles of warmth and cooperation lay the foundations of later societies. Even in this frozen era, innovation never ceased. Humans learned to work with new materials. They shaped flint and obsidian into blades so sharp they could slice hide like paper. They carved bone needles and developed the first fitted clothing, layers of fur tied with leather thongs tailored to seal warmth. Footwear was padded with moss and lined with skin. These garments turned the human body into its own shelter, portable and adaptable, allowing travel across distances that would have killed the unprepared. As glaciers locked up vast amounts of water, sea levels dropped by more than 100 meters, exposing land bridges that altered the map of the world. One such bridge connected Siberia to Alaska, opening the gateway to the Americas. Across generations, small bands of humans crossed these frozen corridors, often unaware they were stepping onto new continents. To them, it was simply another stretch of land to explore, another promise of game and safety ahead. The Ice Age also tested spiritual endurance. In a world where death lurked behind every snowdrift, humans began to look beyond the physical. They buried their dead with care, placing tools, beads, or animal bones beside them, offerings for a journey into an unseen realm. The concept of life beyond death of forces controlling weather and fate likely gained strength during this time. The harsh environment made meaning a survival tool as vital as any spear. As the Ice Age progressed, humans were forced to develop a keen understanding of seasonal and environmental patterns. Observing animal behavior became a science of instinct and careful attention. The migration of reindeer, the nesting habits of birds, the subtle changes in vegetation, all were crucial indicators. By reading these signs, prehistoric humans could anticipate where food and water would be, which paths were safe, and which dangers were approaching. Survival was a combination of memory, observation, and foresight. It was an intelligence honed by necessity, and it gave humans a remarkable advantage over even the most physically powerful predators. Hunting in such harsh environments required collaboration. A single person could not take down a mammoth or even a herd of reindeer alone. Coordinated groups would strategize using knowledge of the terrain and animal behavior. Humans devised driving techniques, where some individuals would herd prey toward others lying in ambush. Traps were built from stone, wood, and ice. Weapons evolved as well. Spears became longer, tipped with hardened points, and eventually composite tools allowed for greater range and efficiency. The hunt became not just a survival necessity, but a measure of ingenuity, intelligence, and social cohesion. The Ice Age demanded resilience beyond the physical. Harsh cold, starvation, and predators tested mental endurance. Humans adapted psychologically, learning to endure discomfort, to plan for scarcity, and to innovate when resources ran low. Storytelling and oral tradition may have developed as a mechanism to teach survival techniques, warn of danger, or preserve group memory. Around fires, elders shared experiences of hunts, migrations, and encounters with predators, transforming danger into knowledge that could be passed on. These stories were practical, educational, and perhaps the seeds of culture itself. The diet of Ice Age humans also reflected their adaptability. In addition to hunting large mammals, they gathered what plants, roots, and berries survived in cold climates. Lichens, nuts, and tubers became essential supplements when meat was scarce. Coastal populations fished and collected shellfish, learning to exploit the abundance of tidal zones. Preservation techniques emerged. Meat could be smoked or dried to last through lean months. Fat could be stored for energy. These methods required foresight and experimentation, turning necessity into innovation. Clothing was a continuous project of adaptation. Layers of fur, hide, and sinew were stitched carefully to create garments that insulated against wind and frost. Some evidence suggests the use of decorative elements, such as beads or patterned stitching, which may have signified identity, tribe, or status. Even in extreme cold, early humans had a desire not only to survive but to express themselves. Their clothing was simultaneously functional and symbolic, a blend of survival technology and social expression. Shelters evolved to meet extreme conditions. In cave-rich regions, humans occupied natural formations, building hearths and dividing spaces for sleeping, cooking, and social interaction. Where caves were unavailable, they constructed huts from bones and hides, carefully layering materials to retain heat. Snow and ice were even manipulated in certain regions, creating walls or insulation. These shelters were the first examples of architecture adapted to climate, showing early humans' ability to manipulate their environment for safety and comfort. Mobility remained central to survival. Humans often moved seasonally, tracking herds or seeking areas less affected by extreme weather. This nomadic lifestyle encouraged both physical endurance and mental flexibility. Those who could not adapt, who failed to read the environment, rarely survived long enough to pass on their knowledge. The Ice Age was a crucible, selecting for resilience, intelligence, and the ability to innovate under pressure. Interactions with other species also shaped survival strategies. Humans learned to avoid or confront predators using fire, weapons, and group tactics. They studied animal behavior, noting feeding habits and migration patterns. Some animals were domesticated indirectly. Dogs, descending from wolves, may have begun as companions in hunts. The early bond between humans and canines represents a strategic partnership, enhancing hunting efficiency and early warning systems against predators. Ice Age humans also began to leave tangible marks of their presence beyond tools. Cave art, carvings, and personal ornaments suggest a consciousness of identity, creativity, and permanence. These works were often concentrated in regions where humans congregated for survival. indicating that even under extreme conditions they sought expression and communication. Art may have served multiple purposes: religious, educational, or simply a reflection of human observation and imagination. The harshness of the climate also influenced social structures. Cooperation was essential. Sharing resources, dividing labor, and maintaining group cohesion were critical to survival. Children learned early the skills they would need: tracking, tool-making, fire management, and social coordination. Knowledge was cumulative, passed from one generation to the next, increasing the group's chance of survival. In a world where mistakes could be fatal, education was not optional. It was a matter of life and death. As humans adapted to the Ice Age, they became masters of observation and prediction. The sky offered guidance. The movement of stars, the position of the sun, and the patterns of clouds all provided crucial information. Snow patterns indicated wind direction and the approach of storms. Animals, sensitive to environmental changes, acted as living barometers. Prehistoric humans learned to interpret these signals, creating a sophisticated knowledge of weather and seasonality long before formal science existed. This awareness allowed them not only to survive but to thrive, turning potential disaster into opportunity. Cultural innovation continued in parallel with environmental adaptation. Groups began to organize more complex hunting strategies, including coordinated ambushes and seasonal migrations that required detailed planning. Some evidence points to early forms of leadership or decision-making hierarchies. Individuals whose experience and judgment guided collective movement. This social structure strengthened survival, creating bonds of trust, communication, and shared purpose. Leadership was practical, earned through knowledge rather than status, and critical for enduring the challenges of a frozen world. The Ice Age also accelerated technological creativity. Tools became more specialized: knives and scrapers for skinning, spears for long-range hunting, and needles for sewing thick hides. Stone points were shaped with precision to pierce thick hides or penetrate deeply into large prey. Composite tools, combining stone, wood, and bone, allowed early humans to extend their physical capabilities, achieving tasks that would have been impossible with bare hands alone. Each innovation increased efficiency, survival odds, and the range of environments humans could inhabit. Fire, again, remained central to life. Beyond warmth and cooking, humans used fire for defense and for altering the landscape. Controlled burns could drive animals toward traps or create patches of new vegetation to attract prey. Maintaining a fire while on the move required careful planning. Embers had to be preserved, dry fuel collected, and safety ensured. The relationship with fire symbolized human mastery of natural elements, giving early humans a powerful tool for survival and exploration. Water management also became crucial. Ice and snow were sources of drinkable water, but accessing them safely required ingenuity. Humans melted ice near their shelters or collected from streams and rivers, learning to assess cleanliness and safety. Water dictated camp locations, migration timing, and hunting patterns. In a frozen world, knowledge of hydrology was a life-saving skill passed down across generations. The harsh environment pushed humans to refine not only their physical and technological skills, but their cognitive abilities as well. Planning, abstract thought, and memory became essential. To hunt a herd of reindeer or follow a migrating mammoth across hundreds of miles required a mental map of the landscape, an understanding of animal behavior, and the ability to communicate and coordinate with others. Intelligence, more than brute strength, became humanity's defining advantage in the Ice Age. Even in the most extreme conditions, humans sought comfort and meaning. Personal ornaments, beads, and carvings indicate a desire for identity and expression. Art was not only decoration, but possibly a form of ritual, communication, or education. These expressions suggest that even amid survival pressures, humans cultivated curiosity, reflection, and aesthetic appreciation, an acknowledgement that life could hold more than mere sustenance. Social cohesion was vital. Groups relied on trust, cooperation, and shared labor. Children were taught early to observe and participate, learning to track, hunt, sow, and maintain fire. Skills were cumulative and transmitted through example and repetition. Knowledge became a currency of survival, and the oldest members of a group were often the most valued for their experience. Social intelligence, empathy, and coordination were as important as physical strength. The Ice Age ultimately shaped humanity's resilience. By enduring extreme cold, scarce resources, and relentless predators, Early humans developed adaptability, foresight, and innovation. These qualities allowed them to explore, colonize, and thrive across the globe. They transformed fear into strategy, scarcity into invention, and isolation into cooperation. The lessons of the Ice Age, resilience, observation, collaboration, and ingenuity remain embedded in human nature today. In this frozen world of ice sheets, tundras, and migrating megafauna, humans were not merely surviving, they were evolving culturally, socially, and cognitively. They turned extreme adversity into an opportunity to test the limits of endurance, to innovate tools and strategies, and to build communities that could persist through anything nature threw at them. Every step across the snow, every fire maintained through the night, every hunt coordinated with precision contributed to a legacy of resilience that defines our species. By the end of the Ice Age, humans had mastered mobility, tools, fire, social structures, and communication to a degree that would allow them to spread across continents. They had endured extremes that would have extinguished many species, demonstrating an intelligence and adaptability unmatched in the natural world. The frozen landscapes of the Pleistocene were not just a challenge, they were a proving ground, shaping the humans who would one day build civilizations, sail oceans, and observe the stars. The harsh beauty of the Ice Age left an indelible mark on our ancestors. It tested every aspect of survival, physical, mental, and social, and through it all, humans learned, innovated, and thrived. They moved across ice and snow, hunted colossal beasts, built intricate tools, preserved life, and created art. In doing so, they transformed a hostile planet into a place they could navigate and eventually shape. The Ice Age was more than an era of cold. It was a crucible of human ingenuity, endurance, and imagination, a defining chapter in the story of our species. Fire is more than heat or light. It is the spark that separates humans from all other species. For prehistoric humans, mastering fire was the ultimate revolution, a technology that changed every aspect of life, from survival to social organization, from diet to safety, and ultimately to imagination itself. While many animals rely on instinct alone, humans began to manipulate and control an element of nature, bending it to their will. In the cold, dark, and unpredictable world of the Pleistocene, fire was power, protection, and possibility. The earliest evidence of human-controlled fire dates back roughly 1.5 million years, with Homo erectus in Africa. While naturally occurring fires existed long before humans, lightning strikes or volcanic eruptions producing fire were unpredictable. The leap from observing fire to harnessing it deliberately was monumental. Early humans learned to preserve embers, carry them across distances, and eventually create fire themselves through friction or striking stones. Each step demonstrated not just survival instinct, but profound ingenuity, a conscious understanding of cause and effect. Fire's most immediate and obvious benefit was warmth. Ice Age humans lived in environments where exposure could be fatal in minutes. Frostbite, hypothermia, and cold-related illnesses were constant threats. Fire allowed humans to settle in regions that would otherwise have been uninhabitable. It extended their range, opening vast areas of Eurasia, Siberia, and eventually North America. By creating portable warmth, humans could explore further, survive longer, and endure winters that would have killed any species unprepared. Beyond warmth, fire transformed food. Cooking was a revolutionary technology. Raw meat was difficult to digest and often carried pathogens. Fire made it safer, more nutritious, and easier to chew. Tubers, roots, and other plant foods became edible only after roasting. By expanding the range of consumable foods, fire reduced the risk of famine and improved health. Over generations, cooking may have influenced human physiology itself. Smaller jaws, reduced gut size, and changes in dentition point to adaptations consistent with diets made possible by cooked food. Fire also altered social structures. Around a controlled flame, humans gathered, shared stories, and exchanged knowledge. Nighttime, once dominated by fear of predators and darkness, became a space of learning, reflection, and cooperation. The hearth became the nucleus of prehistoric society, a place where leadership, communication, and culture began to coalesce. People could coordinate hunts, teach younger members essential skills, and reinforce social bonds in ways impossible in darkness or isolation. Predator defense was another transformative benefit. Wolves, lions, and other carnivores feared fire. A controlled flame kept camps safe, allowing humans to occupy areas that might otherwise have been dominated by dangerous animals. It gave humans an edge, a measure of security that extended beyond brute strength. Fire allowed them to manipulate the environment, burning grass to drive prey into traps or clear land for easier movement, turning natural resources into strategic tools. Mastery of fire was not instantaneous. It was learned, refined, and passed across generations. Maintaining a fire required knowledge of fuels, wind patterns, and ignition methods. Dry wood, bone, or dung might serve as fuel. Sparks from flint or friction techniques enabled humans to relight embers when natural sources were unavailable. Fire became portable, a lifeline carried in embers or specially prepared fire pits, capable of surviving long migrations. The concept of tending a flame represents one of humanity's earliest forms of continuous foresight and resource management. Cognitive development accompanied fire mastery. Controlling fire required planning, sequencing actions, and predicting outcomes, skills that shaped the human mind. It encouraged abstract thinking. Humans had to understand that sparks could ignite tinder, that dry leaves burned faster than wet ones, that wind could either feed or extinguish flames. In essence, early fire users were conducting small experiments in physics and chemistry, centuries before formal science would exist. The cultural implications of fire were immense. Beyond practical use, fire became central to ritual and symbolism. Evidence of burnt offerings, controlled burns, and ritual hearths suggests humans began associating fire with spiritual or communal significance. Flames may have represented life, transformation, and control over the uncontrollable. They became a medium for expression and an anchor for communal identity. Fire was not merely a tool. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, resilience, and dominance over environment. Fire also enabled technological evolution in other areas. It facilitated the development of new materials. Bone could be hardened, wood shaped more effectively, and stones heated to fracture predictably for tool-making. Pottery, although coming later, relied on fire mastery, as did tanning hides for clothing. Humans could manipulate resources beyond immediate natural constraints, extending what was possible and expanding the technological horizon. In this sense, fire was a catalyst for all future innovation. From stone tools to metallurgy and beyond, even migration and settlement patterns were influenced by fire. Humans could occupy colder climates for longer periods, travel farther without losing access to warmth, and store food safely for extended journeys. Campsites were designed around hearths, reinforcing social and spatial organization. Groups could coordinate in larger numbers, and communal activity extended beyond survival tasks to include planning, communication, and shared rituals. Finally, fire reshaped the human relationship with risk and the unknown. Night, previously a domain of fear and predation, became a space of controlled illumination. Darkness no longer limited movement or exploration. Humans could venture out, observe, and adapt. Fire created a bridge between humans and the natural world, giving them leverage over forces that had previously been unpredictable and uncontrollable. This leverage was psychological as much as practical, instilling confidence and curiosity alongside survival. Fire's mastery marked the first profound separation between humans and other animals. While predators relied on instinct, humans could manipulate elements, foresee consequences, and plan ahead. Fire was the first tool that fundamentally reshaped the environment while simultaneously shaping human cognition, society, and culture. It was the beginning of human dominance over nature, not through destruction, but through intelligent interaction, observation, and adaptation. The mastery of fire also sowed seeds for art, language, and communal culture. Around its glow, humans could observe shadows, tell stories, and express ideas visually and verbally. Social hierarchies and roles emerged in relation to fire use: who tended the flame, who hunted, who taught, who observed. Fire was central to the evolution of complex human societies long before permanent settlements or agriculture existed. It was both a lifeline and a classroom, a source of warmth and a crucible for thought. Fire was also intimately tied to survival strategies during harsh climates. In the Ice Age, maintaining warmth through winter could mean life or death. Fire, extended the human range into regions that would otherwise have been uninhabitable. Its management demanded foresight, skill, and cooperation. Those who mastered fire could survive longer, travel farther, and exploit resources more efficiently than those who did not. It amplified human intelligence, endurance, and adaptability simultaneously. By harnessing fire, prehistoric humans transformed every aspect of existence. Food became safer and more nutritious, shelters more habitable, nights more manageable, predators less threatening, and social bonds stronger. Fire was more than a discovery. It was a revolution, a technology that changed the trajectory of human evolution, cognition, and culture. It allowed humans not merely to survive, but to expand, innovate, and eventually shape the world in ways no other species could. For prehistoric humans, the hunt was far more than the acquisition of food. It was a multidimensional enterprise, a sophisticated blend of observation, strategy, cooperation, and innovation. Survival depended upon it. Unlike other predators, humans were not the fastest, strongest, or sharpest. Instead, they relied on intelligence, endurance, and coordination. The hunt became a defining activity that shaped not only their daily existence, but also their cognitive, social, and cultural development. Hunting required an intimate understanding of the natural world. Prehistoric humans were keen observers of animal behavior. They studied migration patterns, feeding habits, and reproductive cycles. They noticed minute details, the tracks left by a hoof, the direction of a tail flick, the sounds carried across open plains. Every instinctual response of prey became data to interpret and predict. This ability to read the environment turned humans into analytical hunters, capable of understanding patterns that no other species could fully grasp. The tools of the hunt evolved over millennia, reflecting ingenuity and adaptation. Early humans used simple stone flakes to cut meat and hide. As techniques advanced, they developed hand axes, spears, and later projectile weapons such as atlatls. These innovations extended their reach, enabling humans to take down animals far larger and more dangerous than themselves. Stone points were carefully shaped to maximize penetration, while bone, antler, and wood were skillfully combined to create tools that were both precise and durable. The hunt became a domain of craftsmanship where survival depended on the quality of one's equipment as much as the skill of one's body. Coordination was crucial. Hunting was rarely a solo endeavor. Large prey required groups to drive animals into ambushes or over cliffs. Some strategies involved surrounding herds and cutting off escape routes, while others used fire to manipulate movement or flush animals from cover. Humans had to communicate subtly and effectively, sometimes across vast distances. Early language, gestures, and calls evolved as practical tools of coordination. Each successful hunt reinforced trust, strengthened social bonds, and honed collective intelligence. Physical endurance played a key role. Humans could pursue prey across long distances, tracking animals through forests, plains, and rugged terrain. Persistence hunting, chasing prey until it was exhausted, required stamina, knowledge of animal physiology, and careful pacing. Unlike predators who relied on sudden bursts of speed, humans leveraged persistence, strategy, and observation. The ability to plan, adapt, and execute over hours or even days set them apart from every other predator. The hunt also shaped social hierarchies and cultural practices. Leaders often emerged who had the most experience, strategic insight, or skill. Success in hunting translated into social status, respect, and influence. Knowledge was passed from elders to younger members, creating a cumulative understanding of the land, prey, and seasonal patterns. Oral instruction, demonstration, and apprenticeship ensured that the skills of hunting were preserved across generations, creating a cultural continuity that would last tens of thousands of years. Fire complemented hunting strategies. Humans used controlled burns to manipulate the environment, driving animals toward ambushes or clearing paths. Smoke could confuse or disorient prey, while firelight enabled nighttime surveillance. These techniques reflect a deep understanding of cause and effect and a deliberate manipulation of natural elements to gain an advantage. Hunting, therefore, was not just physical, It was an intellectual and strategic endeavor. Hunting also reinforced ingenuity in problem solving. When faced with difficult prey or harsh environments, humans experimented with new tactics and tools. They learned to make nets, snares, and traps. They studied animal weaknesses, timing attacks, with reproductive cycles or exploiting seasonal vulnerabilities. Each innovation increased efficiency, survival chances, and understanding of the environment. Hunting was a laboratory for human intelligence. Nutrition from hunting shaped human evolution. Large mammals provided not only meat, but fat, marrow, and hides. Fat was especially critical in cold climates, providing concentrated calories necessary for survival. Marrow, rich in nutrients, could be extracted with specialized tools. Hides were repurposed for clothing, shelter, and equipment. Every part of the animal contributed to survival, reflecting a holistic approach to resource use. The hunt, therefore, was not merely about consumption, it was a comprehensive management of natural resources. Hunting also influenced human mobility. Groups followed herds across landscapes, developing seasonal migration patterns. Knowledge of prey movement dictated settlement locations, camp timing, and exploration routes. Over generations, humans mapped territories mentally, creating cognitive landscapes that guided their movement across vast and unfamiliar regions. Hunting drove migration, exploration, and eventually the colonization of new continents. Risk and danger were inseparable from the hunt. Humans faced predators, rough terrain, and the unpredictability of large animals. Injuries could be fatal, particularly in harsh climates far from safe shelter. These risks required calculated decision-making, teamwork, and contingency planning. The capacity to evaluate danger and act strategically was honed in the crucible of hunting and became a cornerstone of human adaptability. Hunting also had cultural and symbolic significance. The animals pursued were often depicted in cave art, carvings, and ritual practices. These representations may have reinforced hunting knowledge, served as storytelling tools, or embodied spiritual beliefs. The hunt was thus entwined with cognition, creativity, and expression, making it both practical and symbolic. Humans were not merely interacting with prey, they were constructing meaning, identity, and culture around the act of hunting. Learning to hunt successfully required observation, memory, and improvisation. Humans had to anticipate weather changes, terrain challenges, and animal behavior simultaneously. Each hunt was a dynamic problem-solving exercise that tested endurance, intelligence, and cooperation. Mistakes could be fatal, success ensured survival, and repeated practice enhanced skill. Hunting became a training ground for the body and mind alike. Over time, hunting fostered innovation in materials and techniques. Humans developed specialized blades, bone points, and spear throwers. They learned to exploit environmental features such as cliffs, rivers, and natural bottlenecks. Hunting practices varied by region, reflecting local ecosystems and animal behaviors. In some areas, humans relied on ambush techniques. In others, they perfected endurance strategies. The hunt was adaptive, context-specific, and always evolving. Through hunting, humans developed foresight and planning abilities that extended beyond immediate survival. Anticipating prey behavior, storing food, and organizing group movement required cognitive skills that underpinned later advances in agriculture, settlement planning, and social organization. Hunting laid the foundation for long-term strategic thinking and the development of early leadership structures. In conclusion, the art of the hunt was far more than a means of sustenance. It was a crucible in which early humans developed intelligence, social organization, technological innovation, and cultural expression. Through observation, strategy, collaboration, and adaptation, humans transformed the act of hunting into a defining feature of their species. It was a sophisticated interplay between mind, body, and environment that shaped evolution, culture, and the trajectory of humanity. Hunting was survival. But it was also mastery, the human ability to read, understand, and ultimately coexist with the wild in ways that ensured endurance, ingenuity, and the rise of civilization. Tools are the tangible proof of human ingenuity. a bridge between thought and action, and the first means by which humans extended their physical and cognitive capabilities. Long before agriculture, long before cities, prehistoric humans mastered tools to manipulate their environment in ways no other species could. Tools were more than survival instruments. They were extensions of the body, amplifying strength, precision, and reach. They shaped the very course of human evolution, enabling our ancestors to survive, explore, and innovate. From the earliest stone flakes of Homo habilis to the finely crafted projectile points of later Homo sapiens, tools represented a continuous experiment in adaptation and intelligence. The Oldowan tools, simple yet effective, emerged nearly 2.5 million years ago and were primarily designed for cutting meat, scraping hides, and cracking bones to access nutrient-rich marrow. While primitive in appearance, their use required planning, dexterity, and spatial awareness. Every strike of one stone against another reflected a deliberate understanding of leverage, force, and shape. Early physics in action. As humans evolved, so did their tools. Acheulean hand axes, emerging roughly 1.7 million years ago, were larger, symmetrical, and more versatile. They could butcher large animals, dig for roots, or chop wood. The sophistication of these tools reveals the cognitive leaps occurring in early human minds. Symmetry, uniformity, and intentionality suggest an aesthetic sense alongside practical necessity. Humans were not merely solving immediate survival problems. They were engaging in forward thinking, anticipating multiple uses, and refining techniques through observation and experience. Tools allowed humans to overcome physical limitations. They provided leverage against larger, stronger prey, extended reach across rivers or thorny vegetation, and offered protection against predators. A spear or club could compensate for a lack of speed or brute force. Tools turned vulnerable humans into capable hunters and gatherers, enabling survival in environments far more challenging than any other primate could endure. They amplified human strength, endurance, and adaptability, transforming the species from passive participants in nature to active manipulators of it. Innovation in tool-making was often driven by environment. In forests, people required cutting and scraping tools for wood and bark. On open plains, piercing weapons became essential for hunting fast-moving prey. In coastal areas, bone or shell tools facilitated fishing and processing marine resources. Human groups adapted materials at hand, creating specialized implements tailored to local conditions. This adaptability demonstrates both intelligence and flexibility, qualities that would underpin later technological revolutions. The production of tools also fostered social learning. Knowledge of stone knapping, hafting, and sharpening techniques was passed from elder to youth through observation, practice, and imitation. Mastery of these skills required patience, fine motor control, and attention to detail. Tool-making reinforced apprenticeship, cooperation, and cumulative knowledge. Each generation refined techniques, building upon previous discoveries, creating a cultural memory embedded in objects themselves. Fire and tools worked hand in hand. Stone or bone implements could prepare tinder and kindling, construct fire pits, or shape materials for heat treatment. The ability to control fire and fashion tools demonstrates an early synergy between multiple innovations, amplifying human capability exponentially. Together, fire and tools formed the foundation for human expansion, survival, and exploration. Tools also transformed diet and nutrition. With cutting implements, humans could access meat more efficiently, extract marrow, and process plants that were otherwise inedible. Tools expanded the variety of foods available, supporting population growth, energy needs, and brain development. Nutrient-dense diets made possible through tools contributed to physiological changes, larger brains, smaller jaws, and enhanced cognitive capacity, highlighting a direct link between technological innovation and evolution itself. Beyond survival, tools became instruments of cultural expression. Some stone tools were meticulously crafted, exhibiting patterns, symmetry, or polish that went beyond mere functionality. Tools could signify status, expertise, or affiliation within a group. Ornamentation and decoration, though subtle, indicate that humans imbued their implements with social and symbolic significance. Tools were not only practical, they were extensions of identity, skill, and creativity. The evolution of tools also illustrates human problem-solving. Early humans were constantly confronted with challenges: hard bones, thick hides, distant prey, frozen landscapes. Each challenge sparked experimentation. By observing natural materials, testing forces, and refining methods, humans discovered techniques that transformed obstacles into manageable tasks. Tool use became a form of externalized cognition, allowing humans to project intelligence into the physical world. Furthermore, tools facilitated communication and cultural transmission. The creation and use of implements required shared understanding of materials, techniques, and objectives. These shared practices reinforced social cohesion, collaboration, and teaching. The cognitive skills involved in tool-making, planning, sequencing, abstract reasoning, laid the groundwork for later symbolic thought, language development, and complex culture. Tools were both practical and intellectual extensions, bridging action and mind. Tool-making also shaped human exploration. With weapons and implements, humans could colonize environments previously too hostile or inaccessible. They could hunt large prey, build shelters, and manipulate resources to suit their needs. This adaptability enabled humans to migrate out of Africa, endure Ice Age climates, and eventually inhabit every continent. Tools were the literal keys that unlocked the world, allowing humans to traverse landscapes that would otherwise have been insurmountable. As humans refined tools, they began to combine materials. Stones were affixed to wooden handles. Bone points were sharpened and attached with sinew or resin. This early composite technology marked a significant cognitive leap. The understanding that separate elements could be combined to create something stronger, more efficient, or more versatile. Humans were not just reacting to the world, they were transforming it deliberately, projecting intent and intelligence into the material environment. The feedback loop between tools and cognition cannot be overstated. The challenge of creating more effective tools stimulated problem-solving, planning, and innovation. In turn, improved tools expanded the range of feasible activities, opening new survival strategies, new food sources, and new habitats. Tools and intelligence evolved together, each amplifying the other, forming a dynamic engine of human progress that would continue for hundreds of thousands of years. In sum, the art of tool-making was not merely a survival strategy. It was an evolutionary force, a cultural catalyst, and a cognitive accelerator. Through tools, humans extended their bodies, sharpened their minds, and shaped their environments. Stone, bone, and wood became more than material. They became instruments of survival, creativity, and identity. By mastering tools, humans forged a pathway from vulnerability to dominance, laying the foundation for civilization, technology, and everything that followed. Shelter is more than a place to sleep. For prehistoric humans, it was the linchpin of survival, a buffer between life and death, warmth and freezing cold, safety and predation. In a world where the elements could kill within minutes and predators lurked in every shadow, the ability to create, find, or manipulate shelter defined the difference between survival and extinction. Every innovation in architecture, from caves to constructed huts, was a response to necessity, intelligence, and the relentless drive to endure. Caves were often the first natural shelters humans exploited. Their protective features, stable temperature, solid walls, overhead cover, offered refuge from cold, heat, storms, and predators. In Europe, the caves of Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira reveal that humans not only used these spaces for survival, but also for cultural and symbolic purposes. Hearths built within these caves allowed fire to warm the interior, cook food, and provide light, creating social hubs where knowledge, stories, and traditions could be transmitted. The cave was simultaneously a sanctuary and a stage for human expression, blending practicality with creativity. Where natural shelters were unavailable, humans innovated. Temporary huts and lean-tos were built using wood, bones, hides, and grasses. In colder climates, mammoth bones were arranged into skeletal frameworks and covered with hides, creating insulated spaces capable of withstanding snow and wind. The construction of such shelters required planning, coordination, and manual skill. Each structure was a careful balance between strength, weight, and thermal efficiency, reflecting an intimate understanding of materials and the environment. Humans transformed the raw landscape into usable space, shaping nature to meet their needs. Shelter was crucial for regulating body temperature. In Ice Age climates, frostbite and hypothermia were constant threats. Even a brief exposure to freezing temperatures could be fatal, especially for children or the elderly. Shelters allowed humans to preserve heat generated by fire and bodies, creating microclimates within which survival was possible. They also provided storage for food, tools, and fuel, ensuring that essential resources remained available even when the outside environment was hostile. social structures were reinforced through shelter. Living in close quarters required cooperation, division of labor, and clear social norms. Decisions about where to build, how to arrange living spaces, and who tended fires or maintained the structure strengthened group cohesion. Shelters were not just physical spaces, they were social centers where roles were defined, knowledge was transmitted, and communities were bonded. The organization required for effective shelter mirrored the organization necessary for survival itself. Shelters also provided protection from predators. Large carnivores like cave lions, bears, and wolves posed constant threats. Human ingenuity mitigated these dangers. Fires, raised platforms, and defensive barriers were employed to keep predators at bay. Even small innovations such as arranging stones around a fire or creating narrow entrances drastically increased safety. Shelter became an active participant in survival, a technology as important as tools or weapons. The environment influenced the design and construction of shelters. In forested areas, wood and bark were plentiful, leading to simple but effective lean-tos or huts. On the tundra or in steppe regions, bones, hides, and ice were primary materials, requiring different techniques and knowledge. Humans adapted their building strategies to local conditions, demonstrating flexibility, problem-solving, and the ability to learn from trial and error. The diversity of shelter types illustrates a profound understanding of environmental constraints and opportunities. Seasonality dictated movement and shelter use. Humans often practiced semi-nomadic lifestyles, building temporary shelters during migrations and returning to more permanent or semi-permanent structures during certain seasons. These shelters supported a rhythm of life aligned with resource availability, following herds, accessing water, and optimizing for temperature. Knowledge of seasonal patterns combined with shelter construction created a sustainable interaction with the environment, allowing humans to thrive where stationary species could not. Shelters also facilitated technological innovation. Fire management, tool storage, and cooking were all integrated into living spaces. Certain shelters were used as workspaces for tool production or as staging areas for hunting and gathering. Shelters became multifunctional. They protected, organized, and amplified human activity. The very act of building a home required observation, foresight, and ingenuity, skills that carried over into every other aspect of prehistoric life. Cultural expression was intertwined with shelter. Cave walls were adorned with paintings, carvings, and symbolic markings. These artistic expressions suggest that shelter was not merely functional but also a psychological and social space. It provided a canvas for identity, teaching, and ritual. Humans transformed spaces of necessity into spaces of meaning, turning survival into culture. The fusion of utility and symbolism reflects a uniquely human approach to the world. Shelter also enhanced reproductive success and survival of offspring. Protected spaces allowed infants and children to live through harsh conditions, while adults could maintain energy for hunting, gathering, and tool-making. Safety, warmth, and social structure within shelters ensured the passing of knowledge and survival skills to the next generation. In essence, shelter was a cradle of life, learning, and continuity. The complexity of shelters increased over time. Evidence of post holes, structured floors, and hearth arrangements suggests that humans began planning spaces with specific functions in mind. Sleeping areas, cooking zones, and communal areas were delineated, reflecting an emerging sense of spatial organization and social sophistication. Humans were not merely reacting to the environment, they were structuring it to optimize survival and social interaction. Furthermore, shelter management required maintenance and resource planning. Materials had to be gathered, structures repaired, and fires tended continuously. This ongoing responsibility fostered long-term thinking, cooperation, and skill specialization. Roles within groups may have been assigned based on experience or ability, reinforcing social hierarchies and collaboration. Shelter became a nexus of strategy, labor, and learning. Ultimately, shelter was a central component of prehistoric survival strategy. It mediated the harshness of the environment, protected against predators, supported social organization, and facilitated technological and cultural development. From caves to constructed huts, shelters allowed humans to expand their range, endure extreme climates, and create spaces for both life and imagination. The mastery of shelter was not merely an adaptation, it was a declaration of human ingenuity, resilience, and the ability to transform the natural world into a habitable home. By providing warmth, safety, social structure, and a foundation for culture, Shelters shaped the evolution of humans both physically and cognitively. The knowledge, skill, and foresight required to build effective shelters ensured that prehistoric humans could endure and thrive where other species failed. Shelter was more than architecture. It was survival innovation and the seed of human civilization. Clothing is often taken for granted in the modern world, but for prehistoric humans, it was not merely a matter of comfort or fashion. It was armor against one of the most relentless adversaries, the natural environment. In harsh climates, where freezing winds, snow, and rain could claim life within hours, clothing became essential for survival. It allowed humans to occupy new territories, travel greater distances, and endure conditions that would have otherwise been fatal. The evolution of clothing reflects ingenuity, adaptability, and an intimate understanding of the materials and challenges provided by nature. Early humans likely began with natural coverings, such as leaves, grasses, or animal hides draped over the body. These rudimentary coverings offered some protection, but as humans ventured into colder climates, clothing evolved in sophistication and necessity. The Ice Age presented challenges that demanded insulation, layering, and mobility simultaneously. Fur, hides, and skins were carefully prepared, stitched and shaped to fit the human form, creating garments that retained heat, repelled moisture, and allowed movement for hunting, gathering, and migration. The process of preparing clothing was an intricate craft. Animal hides had to be cleaned, tanned, and softened, often using smoke, water, or natural oils. Fur was preserved and positioned to maximize warmth. Sinew or plant fibers were transformed into threads capable of stitching hides together. Bone needles, sharpened and hollowed, facilitated precision sewing. This combination of materials and techniques demonstrates not only technical skill but also a deep understanding of physical properties and functionality. Clothing was a form of technology, as vital to survival as tools or fire. Clothing also evolved according to environment and activity. In colder regions, layered garments insulated against extreme temperatures, while lighter coverings sufficed in milder climates. Footwear protected feet from frozen ground, rough terrain, and sharp objects, sometimes padded with moss or grass for additional insulation. Head coverings, gloves, and cloaks extended protection to extremities most vulnerable to frostbite. The diversity of clothing reflects human ingenuity in solving environmental challenges with available resources. Beyond practical use, clothing had social and symbolic significance. Ornamentation, decoration, and the selection of specific furs or skins may have communicated identity, status, or group affiliation. Beads, pigments, and patterns were incorporated into garments, indicating that even under survival pressures, humans expressed creativity and individuality. Clothing was both functional and symbolic, a reflection of intelligence, social awareness, and aesthetic sensibility. The creation and maintenance of clothing required planning and foresight. Materials had to be sourced, processed, and stored in anticipation of seasonal changes. Knowledge of how to preserve hides, repair garments, and adapt clothing to shifting conditions was essential for survival. Children likely learned these skills from elders, ensuring the transmission of critical knowledge across generations. Clothing became a medium through which practical expertise and cultural traditions were passed down, embedding survival strategies in daily life. Clothing was also integral to hunting and mobility. Insulated garments allowed humans to spend long hours tracking prey across frozen landscapes or through dense forests. Footwear enhanced endurance and stability, enabling longer and more efficient expeditions. In effect, clothing extended the body's capabilities, transforming humans into more effective hunters and gatherers. The combination of clothing, tools, and fire created a synergy that enabled survival in climates far harsher than the human body alone could endure. Technological innovation accompanied clothing development. Humans learned to combine different materials for maximum effect: soft inner layers for comfort, thicker outer layers for protection, and additional padding in areas subject to friction or cold. Fastening techniques evolved from simple ties to more complex lacing or buttons made from bone or ivory. Each innovation reflected an understanding of ergonomics, insulation, and environmental adaptation. Clothing became a sophisticated technology that married function, efficiency, and ingenuity. Clothing also had psychological and social functions. Being adequately dressed provided confidence and security, reducing the mental stress associated with exposure to extreme conditions. Group members could identify allies, status, or roles through garments and adornment. Clothing reinforced cohesion, hierarchy, and identity much like tools or shelter. It was simultaneously practical, cultural, and symbolic, shaping both individual and collective experiences. The evolution of clothing mirrors broader human cognitive and cultural development. The foresight to prepare garments for future conditions, the skill to create functional and durable attire, and the creativity to incorporate symbols or ornamentation all reflect advanced problem-solving, planning, and abstract thought. Clothing was more than protection. It was a manifestation of human intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. It demonstrates how early humans transformed raw materials into technologies that shaped both survival and society. In addition, clothing allowed humans to expand their range geographically. Regions that were previously uninhabitable due to extreme cold or precipitation became accessible. Humans could migrate, hunt, and settle in diverse environments, confident that their clothing would provide the necessary protection. This adaptability facilitated global dispersal and population growth, laying the foundation for human dominance over a variety of ecosystems. Clothing also fostered specialization and collaboration. Gathering materials, processing hides, sewing garments, and maintaining equipment required division of labor and cooperation. Groups could work together to outfit entire bands, ensuring collective survival. Skills were passed down, refined, and innovated upon, creating a cycle of technological and cultural enhancement. Clothing, therefore, was not merely an individual necessity, but a collective achievement that reinforced social bonds and knowledge transmission. Ultimately, clothing represents a critical intersection of survival, technology, and culture. It was a practical shield against the environment, an amplifier of physical capability, a medium of social identity, and a canvas for human creativity. In every stitch, hide, and fiber, prehistoric humans expressed their intelligence, adaptability, and ingenuity. Clothing allowed them to survive extremes, explore new territories, and thrive where other species could not. It was in essence armor against nature, and a testament to the uniquely human ability to transform necessity into innovation. By mastering clothing, humans expanded the boundaries of their survival, extended the functional limits of their bodies, and created a platform for cultural expression. It was an indispensable element in the broader toolkit of human adaptation, working in concert with fire, tools, and shelter to ensure endurance, exploration, and the flourishing of early societies. Clothing was not simply a convenience, it was a cornerstone of human resilience, ingenuity, and evolution. Communication is the invisible framework that binds human society together. And for prehistoric humans, it was not a luxury, it was a lifeline. In a world where survival depended on coordination, knowledge sharing, and cooperation, the ability to convey information accurately and efficiently determined life or death. Prehistoric humans developed sophisticated communication systems long before written language, laying the foundation for complex social structures, collaboration, and culture. Early communication likely began with gestures, facial expressions, and vocalizations. These were essential in coordinating hunts, warning of predators, or signaling resource locations. A simple hand signal could redirect a hunting party, a grunt could convey urgency, and a raised arm might signal a threat. Over time, these systems became increasingly refined, allowing for nuanced expression of ideas, emotions, and plans. Humans learned to interpret subtle cues, a skill critical for group cohesion and survival. Vocal communication evolved alongside social complexity. Simple calls developed into structured sequences that conveyed specific meanings. Scientists speculate that early humans may have used proto-language, distinct sounds representing objects, actions, or warnings. The ability to communicate abstract concepts, like the location of a distant prey herd or the timing of a seasonal migration, required cognitive sophistication. These early linguistic abilities facilitated planning, teaching, and problem-solving, making groups more effective than solitary individuals or less organized species. Communication was inseparable from social organization. Prehistoric humans lived in bands or tribes where cooperation was essential. Tasks such as hunting, shelter construction, and child rearing required division of labor and coordination. Leaders or experienced individuals likely guided group decisions, while others executed specialized roles. Social hierarchies, though fluid, emerged based on knowledge, skill, or age. Communication reinforced these structures, ensuring that instructions, strategies, and knowledge were transmitted effectively. Teaching and learning were fundamental. Survival skills had to be passed down, from tool-making to fire management, tracking, and environmental awareness. Elders and experienced hunters acted as instructors, using demonstration, imitation, and storytelling to transmit expertise. Oral tradition became a repository of collective memory, preserving techniques, environmental knowledge, and cultural norms. Every story shared around a fire or gesture in the field was a survival tool, encoding wisdom accumulated over generations. Communication also extended to coordination during hunts. Successfully hunting large or dangerous prey required timing, synchronization, and understanding among multiple individuals. Signals were developed to guide movements, indicate danger, or coordinate ambushes. Groups that mastered these systems gained a significant advantage in securing food, protecting themselves, and sustaining population growth. Communication transformed hunting from a solitary struggle into a cooperative enterprise. Social bonds were reinforced through communication. Expressing emotions, establishing trust, resolving conflict, and sharing experiences all strengthened group cohesion. Laughter, vocalizations, gestures, and storytelling fostered empathy and solidarity, essential for enduring harsh environments. Groups that maintained strong social ties were more resilient, better able to cooperate, and more likely to survive periods of scarcity or danger. Social intelligence, therefore, was as critical as physical strength. Ritual and symbolic communication likely played a role as well. Cave art, carvings, ornaments, and ritualistic practices suggest humans were capable of abstract representation and shared symbolic meaning. These forms of communication may have reinforced group identity, conveyed cultural values, or taught survival strategies in encoded forms. Symbols allowed information to persist across time and space, transcending immediate experience and enabling continuity of knowledge and belief systems. Conflict resolution and negotiation were other vital aspects of social communication. Sharing resources, mediating disputes, and maintaining group harmony required subtle social skills. Humans had to balance individual needs with collective survival, often requiring diplomacy, compromise, and persuasion. Social intelligence intertwined with communication, producing behaviors that optimize cooperation and minimize destructive conflict. These skills were as important as hunting or tool-making in ensuring survival. Cooperation extended beyond immediate family units. Groups likely interacted, shared knowledge, exchanged resources, or established alliances. Communication enabled coordination between different bands, creating networks that improved access to food, materials, and information. The ability to negotiate, warn, and collaborate with outsiders expanded survival strategies, allowing humans to inhabit diverse environments and respond collectively to threats. The development of communication reinforced cognitive growth. Planning, abstract thought, and memory were essential to create, interpret, and respond to signals. Humans had to understand cause and effect relationships, anticipate responses, and modify behavior based on feedback. Communication was not passive. It was an interactive process that engaged reasoning, empathy, and social intelligence. These abilities laid the groundwork for later language, culture, and civilization. Ritualized communication, including chants, songs, or coordinated movement, may have reinforced group cohesion, transmitted cultural norms, or marked seasonal and environmental events. Such practices encouraged participation, memory retention, and collective identity. By embedding meaning in sound, gesture, or action, humans created a shared cognitive environment, enhancing cooperation and cultural transmission. Communication also enhanced technological development. Teaching how to make and use tools, construct shelters, or create clothing required precise instruction. Groups that could share detailed knowledge efficiently achieved higher survival rates and fostered innovation. Knowledge became cumulative, allowing each generation to improve upon the previous, accelerating cultural and technological evolution. Ultimately, communication and social organization were inseparable from survival. Prehistoric humans relied on collaborative planning, teaching, and coordination to hunt, gather, build, and protect themselves. The ability to convey information, understand intention, and act collectively amplified the impact of fire, tools, clothing, and shelter. Humans thrived not merely because of individual strength or skill, but because of the networks of cooperation that communication enabled. In conclusion, communication was both a survival mechanism and a catalyst for human advancement. It enabled coordination, learning, social cohesion, and cultural transmission. Social organization provided structure and purpose, ensuring that knowledge, resources, and responsibilities were distributed effectively. Together, communication and social systems transformed humans from vulnerable individuals into adaptive, resilient, and innovative groups capable of shaping their environment and leaving an indelible mark on the world. Prehistoric humans were not merely surviving, they were collaborating, strategizing, and laying the foundation for civilization itself. Hunting was never a simple task for prehistoric humans. Unlike big cats with built-in claws and explosive muscle power, or wolves with unmatched endurance and pack coordination from birth, humans entered the world physically underpowered. They had no natural weapons, no thick fur, no razor-sharp teeth, and yet they became some of the most successful predators on the planet. How? Through strategy, cooperation, and the astonishing ability to innovate and adapt. Hunting was not just about strength, it was about intelligence, social coordination, and a deep understanding of the natural world. One of the earliest and most powerful hunting tools humans possessed was teamwork. Hunting large animals, mammoths, bison, elk, or ancient megafauna, required synchronized movements, clear communication, and a shared plan. These hunts could last hours or even days, and success depended not just on physical stamina but on mental resilience. Hunters needed to interpret tracks, read weather patterns, anticipate the movements of prey, and distribute roles within the group. Some members would drive the animals forward, others would flank from the side, and skilled individuals with spears or projectiles would deliver the final blows. This complexity made hunting a form of social engineering. Tracking was another essential skill. Prehistoric hunters were masters of interpreting the language of the landscape. A bent blade of grass could signal a recent passage. A cluster of disturbed soil might reveal the direction a herd had moved. Footprints, scat, broken branches, and even subtle shifts in wind direction all played into the hunter's understanding of their target. These skills weren't random. They were learned, practiced, and passed across generations. Tracking required patience, focus, and exceptional observational power. Often hunters would follow prey for miles, pacing themselves carefully to avoid exhaustion, while ensuring they remained close enough to act when opportunity struck. Stealth and patience were just as important as speed. Humans learned early on that rushing blindly toward prey spooked animals and wasted energy. Instead, they used terrain to their advantage, crouching behind rocks, approaching from downwind, or slowly inching closer by mimicking the rhythms of the environment. Some hunters even disguised themselves with mud, ash, or animal scents to blend into the surroundings. This early form of camouflage demonstrated the creativity and behavioral flexibility that humans became known for. Persistence hunting is one of the most remarkable strategies ever developed by prehistoric humans. Unlike sprinting predators, humans excelled in long-distance running and heat endurance. Our ability to sweat efficiently gave us an evolutionary advantage over many quadrupeds that overheated more quickly. In persistence hunts, small groups of hunters would track an animal during the hottest part of the day, using steady jogging and tactical bursts of speed to keep the animal moving. As the hours passed, the prey would gradually overheat and collapse from exhaustion. This method required incredible stamina, mental discipline, and group coordination, but it allowed humans to secure large prey with minimal risk. It was a triumph of endurance over brute strength. Ambush tactics also played a major role. Humans used natural features like cliffs, ravines, and narrow passages to funnel animals into kill zones. By predicting where herds would travel, towards water, shade, or grazing grounds, hunters could position themselves strategically. In some regions, evidence suggests that humans built temporary structures, such as simple fences or stone lines, to direct animals along specific paths. Once the prey entered the confined area, coordinated strikes ensured a successful kill. Ambush hunting emphasized planning, cooperation, and environmental knowledge. It transformed landscapes into hunting tools. The development of weapons amplified human hunting capabilities. Early spears, forged with stone tips and wooden shafts, allowed hunters to strike from a distance, reducing the danger of close confrontation. Later, the invention of spear throwers and bows revolutionized hunting even further. These tools provided greater range, accuracy, and power. A skilled hunter using a bow could target specific animals within a moving herd, ensuring precise and efficient kills. The creation and use of these weapons required craftsmanship, training, and a deep understanding of physics, even if prehistoric humans didn't name it as such. Every hunter became a technician as well as a predator. Hunting was also embedded in the social fabric of prehistoric life. It wasn't solely about acquiring food, it was a means of bonding, teaching, and building trust. Young individuals learned by accompanying adults, observing techniques, and practicing with smaller animals. Stories about past hunts were shared around fires, not only to entertain but to preserve valuable knowledge. These narratives were survival guides wrapped in memory and culture. Hunting fostered roles within groups, shaping social structures and hierarchies. Skilled hunters earned respect, but cooperation ensured no one person held all the knowledge or responsibility. Importantly, hunting was never just about killing. It required a profound respect for the animals and environments that sustained human life. Prehistoric communities often recognized patterns in migration, breeding, and resource renewal. Overhunting could devastate a region, so sustainable practices emerged naturally from experience. Moving across landscapes allowed herds time to recover. Rituals and symbolic acts might honor the animals taken, reinforcing a cultural understanding that survival depended on balance rather than exploitation. This respect was not romantic, it was practical, rooted in the recognition that nature, when misused, could become unforgiving. Group coordination during hunts reflected a sophisticated understanding of collective psychology. Hunters needed to trust one another implicitly. One poorly timed movement or miscommunication could alert prey or put a teammate in danger. Cooperation, patience, and shared goals formed the backbone of prehistoric hunting culture. These hunts strengthened bonds, fostered empathy, and reinforced social responsibility. Working together to overcome challenges became a defining feature of humanity. In many ways, hunting strategies shaped the human mind. The need to predict outcomes, assess risks, and collaborate effectively spurred cognitive development. Planning complex hunts required memory, foresight, creativity, and an ability to model what others were thinking. Skills essential for language, problem-solving, and social interaction. Hunting wasn't simply a physical act, it was a catalyst for the evolution of human intelligence. Ultimately, prehistoric hunting was a testament to human resilience, adaptability, and ingenuity. Through strategy, teamwork, and a deep connection to the environment, humans transformed their physical disadvantages into overwhelming advantages. They became predators not by force but by intellect, not by speed but by endurance, not by solitude but by community. Hunting shaped human societies, bodies, and minds, laying the groundwork for the rich cultural and technological evolution that followed. Long before agriculture, long before the cultivation of crops or the domestication of animals, prehistoric humans relied on the natural world as their pantry, medicine cabinet, and hardware store. Gathering and foraging were not secondary tasks. They were essential pillars of survival, providing the bulk of daily calories and nutrients for countless generations. To thrive in harsh and ever-changing environments, prehistoric humans needed an intimate understanding of plants, fungi, nuts, seeds, roots, fruits, and the countless ecological cycles that governed their availability. Foraging was as demanding and complex as hunting, requiring knowledge, patience, observation, and adaptability. Understanding what could be eaten and what could kill was one of the first and most crucial forms of prehistoric expertise. Early humans lived in landscapes abundant with vegetation, but not all of it was safe or nutritious. Some plants offered vital vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates, while others contained toxins capable of causing severe illness or death. Foragers learned to distinguish subtle differences in shape, color, texture, and smell. They learned which roots needed to be cooked to neutralize toxins, which berries ripened at specific seasons, and which fungi grew only in certain soil conditions. This expertise wasn't guesswork. It was a body of knowledge developed through observation, experimentation, and generational learning. Seasons dictated foraging patterns. In spring, fresh greens and shoots emerged, offering vitamins desperately needed after long winters. Summer brought berries, insects, and roots, bursting with flavor and energy. Fall was a season of abundance. Nuts, seeds, tubers, and fruits could be gathered and stored. Winter required reliance on preserved foods, dried berries, nuts, and whatever plant materials could withstand the cold. Foraging was a rhythm of life that followed nature's tempo. Successful groups planned ahead, gathering surplus when possible, and carefully managing their stores to survive lean times. Nuts and seeds were particularly valuable, high in fats, proteins, and calories. They provided dense, long-lasting energy. Acorns could be leached to remove bitterness and toxins, while hazelnuts, walnuts, and almonds were eaten raw or roasted. Seeds were ground into pastes, flours, or porridges. These nutrient-rich foods powered both daily activities and long migrations. Through practice, humans learned which nuts could be eaten raw, which needed roasting, and which could be safely stored for months. Roots and tubers were nutritional staples. Buried beneath soil, they offered carbohydrates crucial for energy. Humans learned to use digging sticks, simple yet effective tools, to unearth these hidden treasures. Some roots required slow cooking to break down fibers or neutralize harmful compounds, while others could be consumed raw. Learning the difference demanded careful attention and cultural memory. The earth itself became a source of sustenance, as long as one knew how and where to look. Berries and fruits provided sugars, antioxidants, hydration, and vitamins. Foragers developed a keen sense for identifying when fruits were ripe or dangerously overripe. They recognized which colors signaled nutrition and which warned of poison. Some fruits were used medicinally, others for dyes or rituals. Foraging wasn't limited to caloric intake. It also contributed to cultural, medicinal, and symbolic practices. Certain berries might be gathered for ceremonies, while others served as early medicines against infections, digestive problems, or inflammation. Insects, though often overlooked today, were vital sources of protein and fat. Ants, termites, grubs, and beetles were collected for their rich nutritional content. They required minimal effort to gather and were available year-round. Foraging for insects required sharp observation, listening for buzzing, watching for burrows, or identifying plants where insects clustered. This practice reflects the opportunistic and adaptive nature of prehistoric humans. Nothing was wasted, and every corner of the environment was explored for potential sustenance. Edible fungi added variety and nutrition to prehistoric diets. Mushrooms were gathered with caution, as distinguishing edible varieties from toxic ones required exceptional skill. Some mushrooms were sources of protein and moisture, while others offered medicinal benefits. Fungi also played roles in rituals or storytelling, serving symbolic as well as nutritional purposes. The complexity of mushroom foraging underscores the depth of ecological knowledge early humans possessed. The role of children in gathering was significant. While adults hunted or conducted specialized tasks, younger members of the group often participated in foraging, learning through hands-on experience. They practiced identifying leaves, roots, and berries, gradually building a mental catalog of safe and dangerous species. This distributed approach ensured knowledge was not confined to a few individuals. It became communal, shared, and preserved. Foraging was an educational system that connected generations through practical wisdom. Women often played central roles in gathering, though responsibilities varied across regions and cultures. Their expertise in plant identification, seasonal patterns, and processing methods was indispensable. They prepared gathered foods, turning raw materials into meals, medicines, and stored reserves. This division of labor was not rigid but evolved naturally from the physical and ecological demands of prehistoric life. Together, men, women, and children created a balanced and efficient system of survival. Foraging required tools as much as skill. Baskets woven from reeds or grasses allowed for efficient collection and transportation. Digging sticks and stone, blades aided in harvesting roots or cutting through thick vegetation. Fire was used to clear areas, encourage regrowth, or drive insects out of nests. Humans engineered their environment subtly, using low-impact methods to increase future yields. Foraging wasn't passive, it was interactive, shaping the landscape in small but meaningful ways. One of the most remarkable aspects of gathering was knowledge of plant processing. Some plants were edible only after specific preparation: grinding, soaking, cooking, or fermenting. These methods neutralized toxins, improved digestibility, or enhanced flavor. The ability to transform raw, unpalatable materials into edible food demonstrates both ingenuity and patience. These processes were meticulous, but they allowed humans to extract nourishment from plants other animals ignored. Foraging also served spiritual and cultural functions. Plants held symbolic meanings. Some were used in rituals, healing practices, or symbolic ceremonies. The act of gathering itself could be communal, strengthening bonds and reinforcing cultural identity. Knowledge of plants became part of oral tradition, woven into stories, myths, and teachings. The landscape was not merely a resource, it was a teacher, a partner, and a source of identity. Ultimately, gathering and foraging reflect the deep symbiosis between humans and nature. Prehistoric humans thrived not by overpowering their environment, but by understanding it. They observed, adapted, experimented, and passed down their findings through generations. Foraging was a science long before science had a name, a blend of ecology, botany, nutrition, and cultural memory. It ensured survival during scarcity, provided daily nourishment, and laid the foundation for future agricultural innovation. Gathering was the quiet force behind human endurance. Hunting may have brought dramatic stories, but foraging sustained daily life, shaped culture, and strengthened communities. It demonstrated that survival was not about domination, but about wisdom, the ability to read the land, respect its rhythms, and use its gifts wisely. In the vast timeline of human existence, water was never a convenience. It was a constant mission. Prehistoric humans lived in environments where droughts, unpredictable weather, shifting rivers, and seasonal changes could dictate the fate of entire groups. Water was life, stability, movement, and survival. Without it, no amount of skill, strength, or ingenuity could sustain a community. And so one of the greatest achievements of early humans was not the weapon, the shelter, or the fire. It was the ability to consistently locate and secure water in some of the harshest environments Earth has ever known. Finding water was an art form, a science, and a generational knowledge system. Prehistoric humans learned to read landscapes with exceptional sensitivity, noticing subtle cues that most modern eyes would simply overlook. The presence of certain plants like reeds, willows, or cottonwoods hinted at groundwater or nearby rivers. The behavior of animals, especially insects and birds, offered clues as well. Birds circling at dawn often signaled distant water sources. Ants frequently built nests near moist soil. Large herbivores tended to migrate along invisible pathways that almost always led to water. Prehistoric humans transformed into environmental detectives, piecing together signs that guided them to the nearest life-giving source. In some regions, water was abundant. Flowing rivers, freshwater lakes, and meltwater from glaciers ensured reliable access year-round. But in many other places, water was elusive, hidden beneath layers of sand or rock. Humans in arid climates learned to dig shallow wells in wadis, dry riverbeds that briefly filled during rainy seasons. These wells required maintenance and constant observation as groundwater levels shifted unpredictably. Knowing where to dig and how deep to reach moisture demanded intimate geological familiarity. These early wells became gathering spots, landmarks, and sometimes even temporary camps. Rainwater collection evolved naturally from observation. Prehistoric humans noticed that certain rocks collected rain in small depressions, providing clean and accessible water after storms. Over time, they learned to take advantage of this phenomenon by using large leaves, bark, or animal hides to channel rainwater into primitive containers. Caves and rock shelters became natural reservoirs where dripping water accumulated in pools. These sources were invaluable during dry seasons, and groups developed mental maps that included not only the presence of water, but the reliability and seasonal patterns of each source. Rivers, though essential, were not always safe. Their visibility meant they attracted predators and rival groups. Prehistoric humans strategized when approaching water, often doing so during times of low activity for dangerous animals or sending scouts ahead to ensure safety. Water sources were both blessings and potential battlegrounds. The ability to approach them wisely and retreat when necessary was a matter of survival. Collecting water required tools. Early humans used objects like shells, gourds, animal bladders, and wooden bowls to transport water. These containers were lightweight, portable, and surprisingly sturdy. In colder climates, carved bone or ivory vessels provided durable storage for melted snow or ice. Over time, more advanced containers emerged, woven baskets lined with pine resin or sap, allowing for temporary waterproofing. These innovations increased mobility and allowed groups to move farther from water without risking dehydration. Ice and snow presented unique challenges and opportunities. In glacial environments, snow was abundant but not always efficient as a water source. Eating snow directly lowered body temperature dangerously, especially in cold climates where hypothermia was already a looming threat. Instead, prehistoric humans melted snow using fire-heated stones dropped into containers filled with ice. This method produced safe drinking water without rapid heat loss. This technique reveals how even in freezing landscapes, humans adapted with precision and awareness. Purifying water in prehistoric times wasn't a formal process. It was a combination of instinct, observation, and simple mechanical methods. Some water sources were naturally clean, flowing swiftly over rocks that filtered out impurities. Others required human intervention. One basic method involved digging small pits near a contaminated source. As water seeped through sand and soil, it became clearer and safer to drink. This rudimentary filtration was surprisingly effective and used by many early cultures. Boiling water became possible only after the mastery of fire and the creation of heat-resistant containers. Before pottery, boiling could be achieved by dropping heated stones into water held in wooden or leather vessels. This innovation allowed humans to kill pathogens, soften roots, and improve overall nutrition. Boiled water wasn't just safe, it was transformative. The ability to heat water expanded dietary options and protected groups from waterborne illnesses that plagued many regions. Another purification method involved using plants. Certain seeds and leaves acted as natural coagulants, helping impurities settle at the bottom of containers. Prehistoric humans observed these effects, often by accident, and incorporated them into their practices. Some plants, like those containing natural oils or antimicrobial compounds, were added to water to improve taste or safety. These botanical tools demonstrate how prehistoric humans merged observation with experimentation to improve their health. Water also shaped migration patterns. Groups followed seasonal rivers, avoided flood zones, and moved between regions depending on rainfall patterns. Water dictated which paths were passable and which territories were suitable for long-term occupation. In harsh environments, water scarcity drove innovation. Humans began storing water in containers, using animal stomachs as portable canteens, and digging series of pits along migratory routes so future journeys would be more manageable. Water wasn't only essential for drinking, it played a critical role in food preparation, tool-making, and hygiene. Soaking roots made them easier to process. Wetting fibers made them flexible for weaving. Water softened hides for clothing and shelter construction. It shaped stone tools by cooling heated rocks or cleaning flakes during napping. Even in prehistoric times, hygiene mattered. Bathing in rivers helped prevent infections, remove parasites, and maintain overall health. Rituals often revolved around water, reflecting its profound symbolic power. Springs, rivers, and lakes were seen as sacred, representing life, renewal, and connection. Some groups believed water held spirits or ancestral memory. These beliefs reinforced respect and careful use of water sources. While practical necessity drove humans to seek water, cultural meaning elevated it to something more, a force woven into identity and spirituality. For prehistoric humans, understanding water was understanding survival itself. Their lives were shaped by the availability, quality, and seasonal behavior of this precious resource. They learned to locate it in deserts, melt it from snowfields, filter it through sand, collect it from rainstorms, and carry it across distances. The mastery of water made long migrations possible, allowed settlement in diverse terrains, and protected communities from disease. The story of water in prehistoric life is a story of adaptation. It shows how humans learn to work with nature, not against it. It demonstrates resilience, intelligence, and humility in the face of environmental challenges. Without this profound relationship with water, humanity's journey across continents, the spread into new lands, the endurance through brutal climates, the eventual rise of civilizations would never have been possible. Water was more than a resource. It was the silent companion of every prehistoric journey, every meal, every struggle, every triumph. It was the lifeline that shaped human evolution and guided the earliest footsteps of our species. Long before fashion, before textiles, before even the idea of tailoring existed, prehistoric humans faced the relentless challenge of staying warm, dry, and protected in environments that were often brutally unforgiving. Clothing was not a luxury. It was an essential barrier between the fragile human body and a world filled with biting winds, freezing temperatures, scorching sunlight, and abrasive terrain. The creation of clothing represents one of the earliest examples of humans altering their environment, or in this case, altering themselves, to survive conditions that their bare skin could never endure. The journey toward developing protective clothing began with necessity. Early hominins living in Africa did not require the heavy furs that later Ice Age humans would depend on, but even they needed protection from sun exposure, insects, and thorny vegetation. As groups migrated outward into colder northern regions, clothing transformed from a helpful adaptation into a matter of life and death. Winter in prehistoric Europe, for example, could plunge temperatures well below freezing, with icy winds capable of sapping a human's body heat in minutes. Without insulation, early humans simply could not have survived the Ice Age, and so clothing became an evolutionary triumph, one that helped our species expand into practically every habitable environment on the planet. The earliest garments were simple, improvised, and functional. Prehistoric humans likely began draping the skins of animals over their bodies shortly after developing the skills to hunt and process hides. These raw hides, though stiff and heavy, provided vital protection from cold and wind. Wrapping one's body in fur was the most straightforward method for retaining heat. At this early stage, clothing wasn't sewn or shaped. It was more like a blanket than an outfit. Over time, however, humans learned to improve these primitive coverings. They discovered ways to scrape hides clean, remove fat, and stretch them to prevent decay. These steps made hides more comfortable, less odorous, and longer lasting. Tanning was one of the most significant prehistoric breakthroughs in clothing technology. Tanning is the process that transforms raw hides into supple, durable leather. Without it, hides decompose quickly and become stiff or brittle. The earliest tanning methods were simple but effective. Animal brains, rich in natural oils and emulsifiers, were massaged into hides to soften and preserve them. Smoke tanning, hanging hides above smoldering fires, added further protection by saturating the fibers with chemicals that prevented rot and insect damage. These methods allowed prehistoric humans to create leather that could withstand rain, snow, sweat, and sun. As clothing became more refined, so too did the tools associated with its creation. One of the earliest specialized tools was the bone awl, a pointed piece of bone used to punch small holes in hides. This allowed humans to lace pieces together using animal sinew, plant fibers, or thin strips of leather. With this simple innovation, real tailoring became possible. Garments could be shaped to fit the body better, maximizing warmth and mobility. Awls eventually gave rise to bone needles, which enabled finer stitching and more complex clothing designs. These small tools were revolutionary, allowing groups to create fitted pants, shirts, cloaks, and shoes. Shoes represent one of the most ingenious forms of prehistoric protection. Walking barefoot over jagged rocks, ice, scorching sand, or thorn-strewn plains was both painful and dangerous. Early footwear was likely simple, wraps of leather secured around the feet, but even these primitive shoes greatly reduced injury and heat loss. Over generations, humans developed more advanced footwear, including insulated moccasin-style shoes lined with fur, sandals for hot climates, and multi-layered foot coverings for snowy environments. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests that humans wore structured footwear tens of thousands of years ago, long before recorded history. Clothing also needed to protect the body from moisture. Staying dry was a major concern in prehistoric climates, as wet clothing accelerates heat loss and increases the risk of hypothermia. Prehistoric humans discovered that certain materials, like animal fat or resin, could be applied to hides to make them water-resistant. Fur itself was naturally water-shedding, especially when well-maintained. People in rainy or snowy regions often layered hides, using an outer layer for insulation and an underlayer to wick moisture away from the skin. Even without modern waterproof technology, prehistoric humans devised impressive strategies to manage moisture. Clothing varied drastically depending on environment. In Ice Age Europe, humans wore thick fur cloaks, layered leather tunics, wool from wild sheep or goats, and high boots lined with soft inner fur for insulation. In desert climates, people wore minimal coverings made from lightweight hides that shielded their skin from the relentless sun and heat. In tropical regions, garments were more about protection from plants and insects than temperature. Leaves, Bark cloth and woven fibers offered relief from bugs, thorns, and harmful UV exposure. This diversity highlights how clothing was not simply an invention, it was a flexible, region-specific adaptation that evolved alongside human migration. Decoration eventually emerged as an important aspect of clothing, though even decorative elements often served practical purposes. Beads made from shells, bones, or stones could weigh down the edges of cloaks, preventing them from flapping in the wind. Sinew patterns stitched into garments reinforced seams and strengthened stress points. But beyond practicality, decoration was a form of communication. A person's clothing might reveal their skill, group identity, social role, or accomplishments. The inclusion of symbolic patterns shows that clothing became intertwined with culture, meaning, and self-expression. Body protection extended beyond clothing. Prehistoric humans used body paint and natural ointments to safeguard themselves from environmental dangers. Clay and charcoal pigments were smeared on skin as protection from the sun, while plant-based oils kept skin from drying out or cracking in harsh climates. Insects posed another constant threat. Resin, mud, and smoke were used as insect repellents. Humans also applied ash or ground herbs to deter biting insects, a simple yet surprisingly effective strategy. Accessories also played a role in protection. Headgear made from fur or leather kept heat from escaping. Gloves made working in cold conditions more manageable. Waist belts, pouches, and shoulder wraps allowed humans to carry tools, stones, or fire-making materials without restricting movement. These practical additions were not merely conveniences. They increased survival odds during travel, hunting, or long winters. One of the most impressive aspects of prehistoric clothing was its adaptability. A single hide could be repurposed countless times. A cloak could become a blanket. A water-resistant piece of leather could be reshaped into a ground mat. Fur scraps could be patched into garments or used as insulation in shelters. Nothing was wasted. This resourcefulness reflects the mindset of people who lived with constant awareness of nature's unpredictability and the value of every material they possessed. Clothing also played a vital role in the social dynamics of prehistoric groups. Skilled hide workers, tanners, and tailors were invaluable members of their communities. The ability to produce well-fitting, durable garments required knowledge, precision, and experience. These skills were taught through apprenticeship, with young members learning from observing elders. Clothing production was a communal effort that fostered cooperation and reinforced group identity. The evolution of clothing was one of humanity's quiet revolutions, a subtle yet transformative change that allowed us to survive in environments far beyond our biological comfort zone. It extended our range, increased our resilience, and protected us from conditions that would have otherwise been fatal. Clothing was our first form of technology that directly augmented the body, effectively turning fragile humans into adaptable, climate-resistant beings in a world filled with predators. Icy winds, scorching deserts, and unpredictable weather. Clothing was more than a covering, it was survival. It was a shield, a tool, a cultural symbol, and an ingenious solution to the vulnerabilities of the human body. Through creativity, experimentation, and generational knowledge, prehistoric humans mastered the art of turning the natural world into wearable protection. Their ingenuity laid the foundation for everything that followed, from felted wool to woven textiles, from tailored coats to protective gear. In the end, clothing is one of the clearest examples of how prehistoric humans not only lived in harsh environments, but truly adapted, innovated, and thrived within them. It represents the moment humanity began shaping its own destiny, stitch by stitch, hide by hide. Shelter was one of the greatest expressions of human ingenuity, a shield against cold, wind, predators, and the unpredictable moods of nature. Long before the rise of permanent architecture, prehistoric humans developed an astonishing range of shelters, each designed with purpose, skill, and sensitivity to the environment. These early homes were not crude constructions thrown together out of desperation. They were the result of observation, experimentation, and a deep understanding of the natural materials available. To survive harsh environments, prehistoric humans needed structures that could keep out the elements, safeguard their fires, and allow their communities to rest and recover. The evolution of shelter was a quiet but profound triumph that shaped human resilience and adaptability. Shelters began with simple, opportunistic choices. Early humans often sought natural formations for refuge. Caves, rock overhangs, cliffs, and crevices provided instant protection from rain, wind, and predators. These natural shelters were more than holes in rock. They were havens where people stored food, made tools, shared warmth, and probably even developed early forms of communication and storytelling. Caves with narrow entrances and deep interiors trapped heat from fires, making them ideal winter refuges. Over time, humans learned how to modify these spaces, clearing floors, blocking drafts with stones or branches, and arranging sleeping areas in warmer, safer corners. These early modifications signaled the beginning of humans shaping their environment rather than simply enduring it. But humans did not rely solely on caves. Not every region offered cavern systems, and even where they existed, competition with predators, bears, lions, hyenas, made caves risky. So prehistoric humans began building their own shelters. One of the earliest forms was the windbreak, a simple line or semicircle of branches, bones, or stones erected to block prevailing winds. These temporary structures allowed groups to rest or process food during long hunts or migrations. Even these minimal constructions show clear strategy, an understanding of wind direction, terrain, and how to create warmth with the least effort. From windbreaks evolved more complex structures. In open plains, tundras, and forests, people began using available materials, wood, animal hides, grasses, bones, to construct shelters with real stability and insulation. The tipi-like hide tents of Ice Age hunters are a prime example. These cone-shaped structures were built from long wooden poles arranged in a circle and covered with thick animal hides. The conical shape allowed wind to pass around them smoothly, reducing the risk of collapse during storms. Inside, smoke from fires rose upward through a small opening at the top, while the thick hides trapped heat. These shelters could be dismantled, transported, and reassembled quickly, perfect for nomadic groups following migrating animals across vast territories. In forested regions, prehistoric humans constructed shelters from wood and foliage. Lean-tos were among the simplest. Long branches leaned against a support beam and covered with leaves, bark, or grass. Slightly more complex were dome-shaped huts made from saplings bent and tied into arches, forming a half-spherical frame that was then thatched with vegetation. These huts were warm, waterproof, and surprisingly durable. The curved shape distributed weight evenly, making them resistant to heavy rain or snow. Such shelters show an intuitive understanding of architecture, how shape influences strength, stability, and heat retention. In colder climates, shelters needed to provide exceptional insulation. Some groups constructed semi-subterranean homes by digging partially into the ground. The earth itself served as insulation, maintaining stable temperatures and protecting residents from harsh winds. Over the dugout pit, people built roofs from wood, bones, hides, or sod. These earth lodges were remarkably efficient, warm in winter and cool in summer. Their entrances were often angled downward or underground to prevent heat from escaping. Even without modern knowledge of thermodynamics, prehistoric humans mastered passive heating techniques through experience and observation. In regions where wood was scarce, such as the steppes or tundras, humans turned to materials others might overlook. One of the most astonishing examples is the use of mammoth bones by prehistoric communities in Eastern Europe. Large circular dwellings made from mammoth ribs, tusks, and skulls have been discovered, forming sturdy frameworks covered with hides. These bone houses were architectural marvels, combining scarce materials in creative ways. Their thick hide coverings provided excellent insulation, while the bones themselves anchored the structures against strong winds. Inside, fires kept the living space warm, and carefully arranged ventilation prevented smoke buildup. Snow and ice, too, became building materials. While the iconic igloo is associated with later cultures, prehistoric humans in cold environments likely experimented with compacted snow walls to shield camps from wind. Snow, when properly packed, holds surprising insulating properties due to trapped air pockets. This principle allowed cold weather shelters to remain surprisingly warm once heated from within by bodies and fire. Though these early snow shelters may not have resembled the perfect domes of later traditions, they served the same vital purpose, turning hostile environments into habitable spaces. Waterproofing and insulation were essential considerations. Prehistoric humans used layers of animal fat smeared onto hides to increase water resistance. Grass bundles stuffed between hide layers created natural insulation, trapping heat and preventing cold air from entering. In forested areas, bark from trees like birch provided excellent waterproof material, capable of keeping shelters dry during heavy rainfall. Bark could be peeled in large sheets without killing the tree, making it a renewable and practical resource. Shelter construction wasn't limited to warmth. It also offered protection from predators. In many environments, large carnivores roamed freely. Lions, wolves, cave hyenas, bears. A well-constructed shelter with narrow entrances and strong walls gave humans a strategic advantage. Fires placed at entrances or within the shelter added a layer of defense, as predators instinctively avoided flames. Even the placement of shelters mattered. Prehistoric humans often built near cliffs, rivers, or natural barriers that reduced the risk of ambush. The landscape itself became part of the architecture. Shelter was also about community. A well-designed camp was organized, intentional, and functional. Sleeping areas were arranged near the warmest part of the shelter, often close to the central hearth. Tool-making stations, food processing zones, and storage areas were designated to keep clutter away from living spaces. These early organizational systems reveal how even temporary shelters became the heartbeat of community life. People gathered around fires to eat, plan, teach, tell stories, and bond. Shelters were more than structures. They were emotional anchors in a harsh world. Seasonal variation required flexibility. Summer shelters were often open and airy to prevent overheating, relying on shade rather than insulation. Winter shelters were tightly sealed, sometimes with overlapping layers of hides and vegetation. Mixed material shelters combined branches, stones, mud, and hides in ways that optimized both strength and comfort. The adaptability of these early homes demonstrates the strategic thinking of prehistoric humans, always reacting to the environment's demands with clever solutions. Transportability was crucial for nomadic groups. Many shelters were designed to be lightweight and collapsible. Wooden poles were reused continuously, hides rolled and carried on backs or sleds, and tools for reconstruction were kept close. The ability to strike camp and move quickly could determine whether a group stayed ahead of weather changes or migrating herds. Shelter building became a practice skill, with groups constructing entire camps in remarkably short periods. Ultimately, prehistoric shelters highlight a truth often overlooked. Humans survived harsh environments not by sheer physical toughness, but through ingenuity. They were architects without blueprints, engineers without tools, and survivalists without manuals. Every shelter, whether made of wood, hide, bone, or earth, was a testament to the creativity and resilience of early humans. These structures shielded them from storms, predators, and freezing nights. They nurtured family life, fostered innovation, and provided the foundation for the permanent homes that would one day define civilization. Shelter was the point where necessity met imagination. It turned the wild into the familiar, the dangerous into the livable, and the temporary into a sanctuary. It shows us that even in the harshest environments, humanity did far more than endure. They created spaces where warmth, safety, and community could flourish. Fire was the turning point, the moment humanity took control of an element that every other creature feared. Before the mastery of fire, prehistoric humans were vulnerable to the cold, dependent on the sun, and restricted by darkness. But once fire entered their world, everything changed. It offered warmth in a frozen landscape, light in pitch black, nights, protection against predators, and a completely new way to transform food. Fire became not just a tool, but a partner in survival. The earliest humans began by scavenging naturally occurring fires, lightning strikes, volcanic eruptions, or brush fires ignited by drought. These fires were unpredictable and dangerous, but even observing them provided lessons. Humans saw how certain woods burned longer, which materials sparked fastest, and how fire could be maintained by feeding it slowly. Eventually, humans learned how to preserve embers, carrying them from place to place in moss, bark, or hollowed-out wood. This embers-carrying technique allowed groups to maintain fire for months, even years, without ever needing to start a new flame. But the real breakthrough came when early humans mastered intentional fire-making. Friction-based techniques such as the hand drill or bow drill allowed sparks to be produced on demand. Striking flint against pyrite or other stones created reliable sparks. This skill was revolutionary, not only because it ensured warmth during sudden cold snaps, but because it meant independence. Humans were no longer at the mercy of nature's fires. They could create their own whenever needed. The benefits were extraordinary. Fire transformed food. Cooked meat was easier to chew, easier to digest, and far safer. Parasites and harmful bacteria were destroyed. Nutrients became more accessible. Tough roots turned soft. Wild tubers became edible, and poisonous plants became safe after cooking broke down toxins. Fire didn't just warm bodies, it fueled brains. Many scientists believe that the caloric efficiency of cooked food played a direct role in the growth of human intelligence. Fire also reshaped the social world. Night was no longer a dead zone. People gathered around flames to share knowledge, plan hunts, tell stories, and strengthen group bonds. The crackling light extended waking hours and provided a communal center. Fires turned empty nights into moments of learning, cooperation, and creativity. Protection was another vital benefit. Predators avoided fire instinctively, giving humans a safe perimeter when sleeping. A ring of burning branches around camp created an invisible shield that saber-toothed cats, wolves, and hyenas rarely dared to cross. In cold regions, fire prevented frostbite and hypothermia. It dried wet clothing, smoked hides for preservation, and allowed people to remain active during harsh winters. Finally, fire became a tool for reshaping landscapes. Controlled burns opened dense forests, encouraged new plant growth, and drove animals into predictable pathways for hunting. Prehistoric humans used flame not only to survive, but to subtly engineer their environment long before agriculture existed. In every region, in every climate, fire was the difference between survival and extinction. It was the first great technological leap, the foundation for everything that followed. Surviving harsh environments wasn't only about strength and skill, it was also about healing. Injuries, infections, illnesses, and parasites were constant threats. Without treatment, even minor wounds could become deadly. Prehistoric humans had no hospitals, no antibiotics, no laboratories, and yet they developed impressive medical knowledge drawn directly from nature. Their pharmacy was the landscape: plants, roots, bark, fungi, and minerals. Through careful observation, trial and error, and generational learning, early humans discovered medicinal properties in countless natural substances. Willow bark, for example, contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin. Chewing it reduced pain and inflammation. Charcoal from burnt wood helped treat poisoning by absorbing toxins. Certain clays could soothe stomach problems or draw out infections from wounds. Herbal knowledge was priceless. Plants were used to disinfect cuts, soothe burns, reduce fevers, treat digestive issues, and repel insects. Some leaves, when crushed, released antibacterial oils. Others acted as natural anesthetics. Bitter herbs stimulated appetite, while pungent roots helped clear respiratory passages. This early understanding of botany wasn't random. It was systematic, tested over generations, and embedded into the memory of the community. Primitive surgery also existed. Flint blades, obsidian tools, and sharpened bones were used to clean wounds or remove embedded thorns and splinters. Some prehistoric groups practiced trepanation, the opening of small holes in the skull, to relieve pressure or treat head injuries. Remarkably, many individuals survived these procedures, indicating careful technique and postoperative care. Wound treatment often involved poultices made from herbs, moss, or animal fats. Moss, especially sphagnum, acted as a natural bandage due to its absorbent and antiseptic qualities. Smoke was used to cleanse areas or sterilize tools. Honey, highly antibacterial, was applied to wounds to speed healing and prevent infection. Healers played essential roles in communities. These individuals, often elders with decades of knowledge, understood which herbs to use, how to prepare them, and how to read symptoms. Their skills could mean the difference between life and death. Knowledge was passed through storytelling, demonstration, and ceremony. Medicine wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. Many illnesses were believed to be caused by imbalances, spirits, or environmental forces. Rituals, chants, or symbolic objects were used alongside practical treatments. Even if spiritual rituals had no physical effect, they provided comfort, reduced stress, and strengthened community cohesion, important psychological components of healing. In harsh climates, healthcare also meant prevention. People learned how to avoid frostbite, heat exhaustion, dehydration, and infection. They recognized dangerous animals, poisonous plants, and contaminated water. They practiced hygiene by bathing in rivers, cleaning tools, and disposing of waste away from camp. Through knowledge, observation, and cooperation, prehistoric humans created a surprisingly effective healthcare system, one that allowed them to survive injuries and illnesses that might otherwise have wiped them out. Toolmaking was the heartbeat of prehistoric innovation. Without tools, humans were slow, weak, and physically unimpressive. But with tools, they became resourceful hunters, efficient foragers, skilled builders, and unstoppable adapters. Stone, bone, and wood were the first materials shaped into instruments that extended human capability far beyond natural limits. Stone was the starting point. Early humans discovered that striking certain stones, such as flint, obsidian, or chert, created sharp edges. These flakes became cutting tools, scrapers, and blades. The technique of knapping evolved into an art form. Skilled toolmakers understood how each stone fractured, how to angle the blows, and how to create precise shapes. A well-made stone blade could skin animals, cut meat, shape wood, carve bone, and defend against predators. Bone tools added versatility. Bones were carved into needles, awls, hooks, spear tips, and decorative ornaments. Antlers became handles for complex tools. These materials were strong, lightweight, and surprisingly durable. Bone needles, for example, allowed humans to stitch hides into fitted clothing, a huge advancement in cold climates. Wood was equally essential. Spears, digging sticks, throwing clubs, and shelters all relied on well-chosen wood. Even early fires depended on dry wooden materials prepared in specific ways. Wooden tools extended the reach, leverage, and power of the human body, enabling tasks that hands alone could never accomplish. Compound tools emerged as humans became more inventive. Stone blades were hafted onto wooden handles, creating axes, knives, and spears with greater force and control. This was a technological leap, requiring adhesives like resin or animal glue, bindings from sinew, and precise construction techniques. The development of spear throwers, atlatls, increased hunting range and power dramatically. Later, humans crafted bows and arrows, a revolutionary combination of elasticity, aerodynamics, and precision. Toolmaking was a deeply social skill. Knowledge passed from experts to apprentices. Camps often had designated work areas filled with flakes of stone, broken tools, and pieces in various stages of completion. Each tool carried the signature style of its maker, subtle differences in shape, pattern, and craftsmanship. Tools didn't just help humans survive, they shaped their identity. Master toolmakers were valued members of their groups. Tools became symbols of leadership, skill, and experience. They were carried across continents, evolving with each new environment. Ultimately, toolmaking transformed humans from vulnerable creatures into adaptive innovators. With every chipped stone, carved bone, and polished wooden spear, prehistoric humans expanded their capabilities, conquered new territories, and paved the path towards civilization. Survival wasn't only about hunting, gathering, or fighting off predators. To endure harsh climates, prehistoric humans needed two essential forms of protection: clothing and shelter. These developments were not luxuries, they were necessities. Without them, large regions of the world would have remained uninhabitable. Clothing and shelter were the early foundations of engineering, architecture, and craftsmanship. The earliest humans likely used minimal coverings, animal skins draped over the body for warmth and protection from the sun. But as groups spread into colder regions, clothing evolved rapidly. Animal hides were cleaned, scraped, stretched, and treated with natural oils or animal brains to make them softer and more flexible. The invention of bone needles allowed for fitted garments rather than loose wraps. Stitching hides together created layered outfits that trapped air and insulated the body. In freezing climates, humans crafted fur-lined coats, boots, hoods, and gloves. Clothing wasn't simply functional. Different groups developed distinctive styles, patterns, and decorations that expressed identity and skill. Shelter followed a similar evolution. Early humans used natural structures like caves and rock overhangs, but these weren't always available or safe. Eventually, they built their own dwellings. Wooden frameworks covered with hides or plant materials formed simple tents. In cold regions, people built semi-subterranean homes, dug partially into the earth for insulation. Mammoth bones were used as structural supports in Ice Age Europe, covered with hides and turf to create sturdy, wind-resistant houses. These shelters provided stability, warmth, and safety during long winters. In forested areas, huts made of branches, leaves, and bark were common. Grass-thatched roofs repelled rain, while stone-lined fire pits provided warmth and cooking space. In open grasslands, people built windbreak walls to shield camps from relentless gusts. Over time, some communities constructed permanent dwellings, returning to the same locations season after season. These early homes represent the first steps towards settled living. Clothing and shelter were also cultural. Decorative beads sewn into garments, painted hide covers, carved tent poles, and patterned fabrics all reflected identity and creativity. Crafting became a shared skill passed from elders to youth. A well-made garment or shelter was a sign of competence and pride. The mastery of clothing and shelter allowed humans to push into environments where no primate had ever survived before. From icy tundras to wind-battered mountains to rain-soaked forests, early humans adapted by building their own comfort zones, protective bubbles that allowed them to thrive in places far beyond their natural limits. Prehistoric humans didn't survive alone. Their strength came from their communities, tight-knit groups built on cooperation, shared knowledge, and emotional connection. These social structures were the backbone of human resilience, enabling people to withstand challenges that no solitary individual could survive. Most prehistoric communities consisted of extended families or small bands ranging from 15 to 40 people. These groups traveled together, shared responsibilities, and protected one another. Roles were often flexible. While some individuals specialized in hunting, toolmaking, or healing, tasks frequently overlapped. Everyone contributed according to their skills, age, and physical ability. Children learned by watching adults, imitating tools, and participating in safe tasks until they gained full proficiency. Cooperation was essential. Hunting large animals required coordinated strategies. Gathering food in dangerous areas needed teamwork. Building shelters, preparing hides, shaping tools, and caring for children all relied on cooperation. Social bonds reduced risk. If one member was injured, sick, or exhausted, others stepped in to help. This mutual support dramatically increased survival chances. Communication strengthened these bonds. Early humans used complex vocalizations, gestures, and expressions. Over time, these systems evolved into language, a powerful tool that transformed social life. With language, humans could share stories, teach skills, plan hunts, warn of danger, and pass down knowledge across generations. Conflict resolution was also important. Disputes over resources, mates, or decisions could threaten group stability. To manage this, communities developed norms, informal rules about sharing, leadership, and behavior. Some groups followed the guidance of elders who carried wisdom from years of experience. Others operated more democratically, with decisions made collectively. Social rituals played a major role in cohesion. Feasting after hunts, gathering around fires at night, decorating bodies with pigments, and creating symbolic art strengthened unity. Music, drumming, chanting, and simple instruments may have played part in bonding and spiritual expression. These activities reminded members that they were part of something greater than themselves. Emotional connection mattered too. Humans formed deep attachments to family and friends. Care for the elderly or disabled, evidenced in archaeological findings, shows that compassion was a fundamental part of prehistoric life. Communities provided identity, meaning, and a sense of belonging in a dangerous world. The strongest groups were those with clear communication, shared responsibilities, and strong trust. These social structures weren't just a survival strategy. They were the foundation of humanity's success. When we think of prehistoric humans, we often imagine basic survival, hunting, building shelters, and enduring the elements. But early humans were far more than survival machines. They were thinkers, creators, and storytellers. Long before civilization emerged, humans expressed themselves through art, symbols, and rituals that reveal deep imagination and spirituality. Cave paintings are among the most iconic examples. In places like Lascaux and Chauvet, vast murals depict animals, hunting scenes, patterns, and mysterious symbols. These images weren't mere decorations. Many were layered intentionally, placed in areas with echoing acoustics or illuminated by torchlight. They may have served as teaching tools, spiritual rites, or symbolic maps of the natural world. The act of creating these masterpieces required planning, skill, and collaboration. Carvings and figurines also played a major role. Small sculptures made from bone, ivory, or stone depicted animals, human figures, and abstract shapes. Some represented fertility, others power or protection. These objects were portable symbols carried between camps, suggesting personal meaning or communal identity. Body art was equally important. Early humans painted their skin with ochre, charcoal, or clay. They adorned themselves with beads, shells, feathers, and bone ornaments. These decorations expressed individuality, status, or group affiliation. They may have also played a role in rituals or rites of passage. Early spirituality emerged from the landscape itself. Humans observed the cycles of day and night, seasons, animal migrations, and the movements of stars. These natural patterns inspired myths, symbols, and beliefs. People may have honored animal spirits, ancestors, or forces of nature. Rituals performed in caves, near rivers, or atop hills were ways to connect with the world around them. Art and symbolism served practical functions too. They taught lessons, preserved cultural memory, and reinforced shared values. They allowed groups to communicate ideas without words, through images, shapes, and gestures. They bound communities together, turning survival into a meaningful experience. In expressing themselves creatively, prehistoric humans revealed something extraordinary. They had minds capable of imagination, emotion, and reflection. Art and spirituality weren't luxuries. They were essential expressions of what it meant to be human. Now, with a smile on your face, you will have a good understanding of how prehistoric humans survived and thrived in such harsh environments, and a good night's sleep. Goodbye, dear friends. See you next time.